Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to do an album review, which is where we check out an entire album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and possibly its connectiveness to a larger theme at play. We don't always listen to concept albums, but an album is a showcasing of who a band was at a specific time, and while the songs may not purposefully be designed to be read together, it's possible to find recurring themes and motifs throughout them. Today we're going to be looking at a band called Reuben. I like to do a little bit of reading into them to figure out where my head should be at going into an album. I think the worst thing I've done in the past is not be in the right mental state to, not a mental state, the right mindset to appreciate an album from the get-go, and I have to shift gears at the beginning, which just isn't always great for the analysis portion. So it looks like they are sort of a mix of alt-rock, heavy metal, and post-hardcore, which is pretty wide range as far as sound go. Um, they had a few albums. They were decently successful in the underground music scene, but never achieved mainstream success. A few songs did chart, with their highest charting song being off their debut album, which is not what we're looking at today. In 2008, they went on indefinite hiatus. They've kind of worked together a little bit in other bands, solo projects, but they've never actually fully come back together for to do more Reuben stuff. There are three members, a guitarist, vocalist, and pianist, and then a bassist and drummer who both do backing vocals. We have 51 minutes of music ahead of us across 11 songs. This album came out in 2007. I'm expecting some rougher production, especially given the alt rock and post hardcore genres that it got lumped into, and the age of it, and the fact that it wasn't mainstream. So, like, all these things are telling me how it should sound. I suppose let's dive in. Kick it off with the opening track, Cities on Fire. Being quite patient here in both the growth of the track and the volume of this. And as you can see, we're only really at high volume right here.
Take it on the chin. This London's shattered skin.
A really big contrast there between like quiet and the really loud burst we're in now. Yeah, this dude just has a very raw, harsh. I think that's going into the next track, but I want to pause it right here. I don't know how varied the album is going to get, but I think this is a fantastic introduction to a sound. I don't know if it's their sound, I don't know if it's the album's sound, but it's a great way to introduce the listener. There's a few ideas in here that I think are setting me up for a strong understanding of how this album's going to be presented, regardless of what sounds they might try to explore. There's quite a bit of variety in here as well that showcases a few different sides of the band, even if they have more sides to show. I think we have a general view of how they're going to craft things. So I guess I'm done talking all this high level stuff. Let's get into what I mean by most of this. Um, this is a texture based track. There's a couple of what I think I would call riffs in here, but for the most part, what our guitar and bass do is foundations and chords. They really present the emotional backbone of what the song is about. Throughout most of this track, we either have just wall of sound concept that's giving us an emotional weight given the fuzz and overbearingness of the instruments, or we have chord progression which give us the emotional aspect of through harmony. In which case, most of this track is dreary, heavy, and downtrodden. I don't, even with the chorus's uplift, especially coming out of the first verse, and kind of feeling that weight released just a little bit harmonically, there is no moment of bright positivity there. It is brighter than where we were in, but that's subjective. Objectively, we're not looking at a series of major chords that are providing something of uplifting or happy or anything. It is a track that is overwhelmingly gloomy and dreary in every section of it. There are moments that are lighter comparatively, but on the larger scale, everything is still on the darker side. And for a song called Cities on Fire, I think that's going to be pretty accurate. I heard a couple lines in here. It says, play your violins and breathe in the sulfur, or something like that. And with lyrics like that, I don't really think we have too much of a positive outlook on the current state of things or whatever they're talking about here. Um, and the dreary, heavy atmosphere certainly leans into that well. Now, the vocals provide us a little bit of change throughout this track. We start off pretty heavy, focusing primarily on harshes. Then we get some clean, aggressive cleans in there. And in the lighter section, our bridge right before our final chorus, we had dual cleans. Still a little bit of grit. Nothing in here is pristine. And I suppose I mean that primarily on sonic level. The timbres of instruments, whether it's the performed part, whether there's a bit of grit in the vocals themselves, or the production on any of the instruments where there's a little bit more compression than I think another band might have utilized. Everything comes off just a bit dirty. Um, and I think it really leans into the rawness of the performance. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself there. Contrasted with that rawness and the harshes, we do have a clean vocal in here, and we actually have a harmonized clean in the bridge between two of the vocalists, and there is something soothing-ish about it. It is a quiet moment that is contrasted rather harshly with the louder parts of the track, and even directly there, right off of our bridge, we smash cut it right up against the chorus, which provides us a low volume and a high volume, a maxed out volume back to back. We really feel the punch of that. We really feel the impact of the loudness. But we can feel that all throughout the song as well. It's really a push and pull of size and width. Not so much layering in the fact that there's only ever four instruments going off at one time. It's not densely layered, but instruments are given extra width and presence through the production, whether that is something the engineer does or something they do with pedals and, adjusting the sounds of their guitars on the fly. It's all how it's produced. And the guitar sounds, the bass sound, the drums, the vocals, they all sort of shift from more narrower sounds, it's a hard word to say, narrower sounds, to wider, larger sounds that take up more space. And all of this can get a bit amplified when we look at just how small the sound sphere is, which it's a pretty compressed track. There's not a lot of room going on in here. Uh, it's what I was expecting for 2007. What I was expecting for rock 2007 and independent band 2007. It all lines up, and this is one of those ways that I was talking about where I like to get a little bit of information beforehand so I can get my mind in the correct place. Otherwise, I'm scrambling to figure out even how I should be listening to it while I'm also trying to figure out what they're doing. Like I said, it just doesn't really lean into strong analysis. Having my head in the right gear is a great way to start. I think it allows for a more positive read as I'm on the same page with them from the very beginning. And the production here, I think if I was expecting something else, I might have, gone on a bit how the production's rough. But I think knowing what they're doing, the production fits well. Um, they have a nice 3/4 feel going on in here that's juxtaposed by a slower 4/4. And you may have noticed at one point, I think it was the second verse, and I started conducting out the triplet 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And after we got out of that part, we shifted to the pre chorus, I think, and I just kind of went to these really big gestures, not really counting out numbers, just kind of emphasizing the beat. And going for that slower 4 feel, which is what that is the intention, I believe. The triplet idea is still present. It's just not the main focus anymore. And you're really getting the downbeats, the beat ones of those groupings of three. So it's not only just how I feel that section and how I think they're intending it to be heard, but it's also, I think, an interesting juxtaposition there in that they can change the speed of the song without really changing the speed of the song. We just change how often we're subdividing or how we're subdividing the bar itself in order to achieve that. For all I know, it was still in 3/4 at that time, but we were really only emphasizing the downbeats, possibly even utilizing dotted quarter notes to fill in the full beat of the triplet. while still being in that triplet feel. That might have went over a lot of people's heads right there. I apologize. I try to keep most things understandable, even if you don't know music, sheet music and stuff. But I think that was really important there because, at least to me, even if they don't know what they're doing, I don't know how trained they are. I don't know if they have music theory or any academic training. I kind of view a lot of rock bands, especially on the more independent side, as self-trained. Um, so maybe they can read tabs, maybe they just play what sounds good, right? But even if they don't know what they're doing, I think they're still achieving it in a way that is theoretically sound, in a way that amplifies what their goals are, what their intentions are. And I think that's worth pointing out, even if they don't know how they're doing what they're doing, which, again, like I said, I don't know where their knowledge laid at this point in time. So I'm not accusing them of knowing or not knowing theory, but it is something I consider often when we talk about rock and metal is, if they knew what they were doing, well, I think most bands know what they're doing, but if they know why what they're doing works, I suppose, would be the way to word that. I think it's a really interesting thing where some people just have really strong intuition for writing music and they don't know why what they write is so affecting or powerful or works the way it does, but they just have a gut that says do it this way and they're like, okay, I'll do it that way, and it just works out really well, but there's like really strong theory behind why it works. Um, but yeah, so like that triplet piece right there, I just, it was really interesting with me hearing it because it does work on a lot of levels, and it actually, from a compositional standpoint, is a really great way to write that section. It reduces the complexities placed on the performer if they were given it. There's no time signature changes there. There honestly isn't really a tempo change there. You can stick with everything you were doing. You just change the notes that are written there, and it shifts the feeling of the tempo. It's what would be a good word for that? Efficient composition, I think, might be a way to put it that way. And like I said, they might not know how to read or write sheet music, but that is certainly a great way to go about doing that. I'm going to find some lyrics real quick. I know that was a bit of a short analysis, but I think we'll have more to talk about as we go forward. I also wager, as with a lot of rock tracks, um, that they're more vocal oriented, especially with music like this that kind of doesn't really have riffs, and the guitars, the bass, and even the drums are really there for atmospheric or ornamental ideas more so than to add to melody. So, lyrics. Alright, so I'm not sure if this is entirely about the 1666 Great Fire of London, but it at least has ties to it. Though it could also just be metaphorically speaking about a lot of decisions and indecisions of the ruling class in an attempt to cleanse the city, kind of idea. And we'll get into all this in a second. If you're like Bryan, it seems like you got a lot of red string tying a bunch of disparate things together. It makes sense. We'll get to it. So it says in the very beginning, so fire it is to make our dark streets clean again, like a reset button on our lives, like hands of God just dusting off the blackboard. And with all we've worked for gone, and all we cherished lost, we can start again. It's this idea of progress being wiped out by a fire this time. It says so it's fire it is. That's the decision this time around. I think possibly tying it back to all sorts of different natural reset buttons, as he states. Tsunamis, tornadoes, floods, all sorts of stuff that have sort of pushed progress back temporarily. This time it just happens to be fire. That's what we rolled this time. Funny way to think about that, I suppose. It says, so play your violin and breathe the sulfur in, take it on the chin as London sheds its skin. Making our dark streets clean again. We're shedding off we're exfoliating London, getting the dead skin off the top so that the healthy skin underneath can shine better. The idea is, so play your violin. There's an annotation here that says it could be a reference to Emperor Nero playing the fiddle as Rome burned beneath him. It says, however, it was probably more like a lyre. That's interesting, because I've also been under the understanding it was a fiddle. But I gotta look that up. Was the fiddle around at the time, particularly in that region? But anyways, the annotation also brings up the Great Fire of London, which happened in 1666 and gutted the medieval city of London inside the old Roman city walls. The city burned. There's a bakery that caught fire, and it could have been put out quickly utilizing the firefighting techniques of the time, but who was it? The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, was indecisive about how to go about dealing with it, and through that indecision it ended up getting too big too quickly, and any of their firefighting techniques were made useless by the time it began to actually spread. It lasted for 5 days, and burned a great chunk of London. Now, of course, talking about the violin and Nero, much the same thing happened in Rome. While Rome burned, Nero was off in his vacation house and just watched it happen. And if I remember correctly, when it was all over, the area that was burned, he decided to turn into a garden or a palace of his own. It's like he wanted that area anyways, and it was just a lucky happenstance. Oh, it just happens you burned to the ground now. Might as well put what I wanted here. So the idea of the working class having their lives ruined, having progress reset because the ruling class didn't help them during a time of emergency is a nice parallel there. And of course, if this is all metaphorical about something happening today rather than specifically looking at past fires and looking at more of a metaphorical fire, then we can see once again they might be talking about how the government at the time was not helping, probably particularly Londoners, in a time of need. And that's what the rest of this track is about. It's just, as he says, take it on the chin. You can't do anything about it. You might as well just roll with it. No one's going to help stop this fire. You just got to do your best to survive it. At the end, he says, where are your churches and libraries, your books and your memories? Well, we burned it all. Yeah, pretty heavy track about the loss of the past, of progress, of lives, in the face of indifference. And I think that the gloomy, overbearing weight of the song absolutely fits with that. Alright, moving on. We're going to check out We're All Going Home in an Ambulance, which is quite a title. We do have a couple more seconds left of this. Like I said, I do think we're transitioning into the next track, so let's continue on.
At school, the choices I made were rock and roll bands and getting good grades. Buck brains and wearing all black.
The rising intensity.
It's like a red flag. The day not a good vibe, or something I've
Lots of
missed.
tension in that escalating chord progression.
Assaulted and for what? I'm up and shout. 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 Shrugged off the shit of my youth, like going up eight or losing at two. But it's not a matter of age.
This one is less dreary than the last one, primarily focusing on a type of aggression.
And I pray to God to shout. Shout. Shout.
A really interesting bass kick tone. It's very flat. I'm digging the vocal lines being sort of placed everywhere. And it's disorienting, I think, in a positive way. This song really wants to fall apart here, and they are not letting it. Yeah, so a really nice 7/4 idea right here, leaving me quite unbalanced. Really interesting to come off of all of that chaos in the last 3 minutes to this
Your race,
chill little section here.
your faith, just your clothes inside. They drink, they fight. It's not safe out tonight. Your race or your faith, just your clothes inside. They drink, they fight, so don't go out tonight.
Really interesting phrasing of the vocal line. That bass tone, jeez.
Oh,
All right, this is a bit of a different side. Cities on Fire was dreary, heavy, weighty. This is filled with angst and animosity. You can hear it in the phrasings of many of these sections. A lot of it is in 4/4, but still goes for odd loops where maybe the fourth beat doesn't nicely flow back into the first one to loop back into it, or sections that employ an odd time signature, like that 7/4 part in the. I don't know if we can call it a bridge. We had a verse, chorus, and then like 5 minutes of linear songwriting. It was more of a short rhapsody tacked on to the end of a traditional structure there. But yeah, there was that one section in there that we hit the 7/4, and it introduced some oddities to it. The song tried to fall apart not long after our second chorus. There's just a lot of places in here that were designed to leave the listener unbalanced, leave them a little off kilter. And that mixed with the general animosity and angst in the tones of the instruments, the riffs that they were playing, the vocal delivery, I think really separates this track from the first. While they are sonically very similar, the guitars sound similar, the drums sound similar, the vocalist still has the cleans and the aggressive. It's still a compressed track. They're not playing with extra instrumentation or layering. It's very much in line with Cities on Fire. It's a very different sound, a very different atmosphere for them, and a different type of composition. We've shifted away from the traditional structure. We've shifted away from sticking with 4/4 and repeatable loops, and we've gone to this Rhapsody idea. We've gone to a lot more atonality, which is something we not atonality, dissonance, which is something I didn't bring up in the first track, but was certainly present there in places, though it was more sparsely used. This track is a way to use the overall general sonic identity of the band in a drastically different way, and I really appreciate that. The first thing we have to talk about, though, is the tension, the dissonance. Like I mentioned, we heard some of this in Cities on Fire as well. I think it's a really great way to get across a feeling of frustration, at least particularly with the way they utilize it. It is an abrasive tone, it can be used to represent quite a few different things, but at least in this track, I really get frustration, disillusionment, and a way, I think, also to just introduce noise to the track, whether that's to get the attention of the listener or to simply say, I don't know something harmonious that I can play here that makes sense. So I'll play something completely dissonant. I'll just play the two tightest notes. We'll get a half step interval here, and I will just play them over and over again and again. Because that's how I feel right now. That tension, that dissonance represents the angst. I didn't really get that from the first one. I think they used the dissonance in a different way. I'm not quite sure what it is. I think I'd have to go back and listen to the specific moments because, again, it was sparsely used. I think it really only popped up in the post chorus before the quieter section of the bridge. But Cities on Fire is already starting to leave me, especially with as much as what was going on in this track. But I don't remember feeling angst from it, or dissatisfaction or disillusionment that I do here. And so I think it's really interesting that once again they're utilizing a tool in a variety of ways that are seemingly completely appropriate for the task at hand. It almost feels like they know exactly what they're doing. And I think this is going to be the last time I try to bring this up. I'm going to attempt to avoid the topic going forward, but if anybody has knowledge about Reuben, and maybe one of their, or maybe all of their personnel, the people who make up the band members, has academic training, compositional training, maybe even took a theory course in university or something, let me know, because this seems to be a step up from other noisier alt rock bands, and that they are doing things that are a bit outside the box in a way that is 100% accurate. And it feels so intentional, like they knew what they were doing even before getting an instrument in their hands. Um, and it just comes off as so effortless that, to me, again, it feels like they have theory knowledge, but I just don't associate that concept with this era of music and this type of music. Usually, when we look at bands who have theory knowledge or something like that, they tend to go in more of a progressive route. We hear that in the tech death scene and progressive musics, not so much in alt rock. So I think that'd be pretty interesting. But like I said, I'm not going to try to bring that up anymore. I mentioned during this that the vocalist has interesting phrasing, and if we look at just the melodic lines, I think he follows a pretty typical formula for melody writing. Doesn't really go too far outside from a home note, tends to make things catchier and more listenable for a general audience. And the way that the melody flows, when he decides to hold notes, when he decides to move quickly through notes, it makes sense. Everything in here feels very palatable from the vocal standpoint. But there's one point that I think is quite interesting to me, and it's when and what syllables he decides to emphasize with harshes. Sometimes it makes sense, the last syllable of the line, or building up into it so we progress from clean to harsh over a sentence. But other times, he'll just emphasize like the third syllable in a line, and then the second, and then like two back to back, and then it just seems random at times. And I find it really fascinating. To me, it's got to be a gut thing, right? You're singing it, and you're like, actually, I feel like this just needs to be a scream, and so you just scream that one syllable and bring it back down to the cleans, and it's I don't know that there's a lot of thought put into it. It just feels like something that would be natural to him, and it creates something that is unique to the band, unique to his vocal patterns, that I can't say I've heard in other musics like this. But it is intriguing because it does create a bit of harshness that, once again, it lines up with everything else. There's so many aspects of this track that it definitely sits and resides and hovers around a very mainstream alt rock sound. Mainstream might be the wrong word. Traditional alt rock sound we might be able to go with. There's a lot of sections in here that feel familiar to my ears, given its closeness to post hardcore, and a little bit of alt rock that I did listen to growing up. There's sections that I can very accurately predict where they're going, but there's other moments that create chaotic ideas that push against that. And the vocal phrasing, when he chooses to go into harshes, sometimes leans into that. And I find it really interesting to see how and when they push against the more traditional sound of this style. And it's always those moments that I feel like I know where it's going. I'm going with the flow. I'm like, okay, they're probably going to go in this direction next. That's where a lot of bands would go. And they do. And I'm like, okay. So I sit in this pocket of like feeling very comfortable and safe with the sound. And then they'll throw something out that just completely takes the rug out from under me, whether it was that section after the second chorus where it sounded like the song was trying to fall apart, or his odd vocal phrasings, or some bit of tension, the dissonance in there. Always finding ways to ensure that, as I mentioned, that the listener feels off kilter, a little unbalanced. Nothing in here is completely safe. And so far, I'm enjoying that. There's enough here that I feel comfortable with. It's a sound that I've spent a lot of time with in general, not necessarily with Reuben. I think this is the first full album I've listened to from them, and I think we've only listened to one other track from them. I've never heard of them before before I started the channel, but I still feel comfortable in most of it. But they ensure that my listening experience is not total comfort, and I appreciate that. Now, this song takes a bit of a twist after the second chorus. Everything up to that point feels standard. We get a verse, we get a chorus, we come back to the verse, we go back to the chorus. It's kind of predictable. I expect us to go to a bridge. The bridge ends up being that noisy, cacophonous, we're gonna fall apart thing where it feels like everybody is just slightly out of sync. Like everybody's on a tempo that's about 5 BPMs off from everyone else. And so it's generally collected, but also just a hair off enough that it feels like it's all going to explode. And from there, we go into a bit of a softer section. This is where we get the quieter vocals. I said, we've kind of lost all of our angst here. We get the harmonies going on in this section, and it's a build up from this point on until the end. But I figured this was the bridge, and we were going to come back to the chorus. And I looked at the time left, and I was like, we haven't even hit the halfway mark. In my mind, we're coming up on the end of the track, and in reality, we're just starting. And I thought that was pretty cool too because it comes off of Cities on Fire, which followed a very standard structure. So once again, they set you up with something familiar and then pull the rug out from under you. I'm really enjoying this. It's close enough to what I'm used to or what I know that they can get under me like this. If it's a genre I'm not too versed in, or if it's like Haken, who is sort of just their own style of music. Um, it's really difficult to surprise the listener when everything is always new. Surprise has to come from an area of comfort. You have to feel like you know what's going on in order to realize you don't. Because if you already know that you don't know what's going on, finding out that you don't isn't a change of pace. It's the status quo. And that's not surprising. And so, with that said, I don't know that everybody is going to have the same reaction to this that I am, which is one of the most true statements I think I've ever said. Most obvious statement, too, possibly. But I really like being able to hear this now. I don't know that if I had listened to this in '07, it would have hit me the same way. It might have been entirely fresh to my ears, and I might have enjoyed it for being something brand new to me, or it might have been too abrasive for me at the time. Who knows? But having spent a lot of the 2000s and the 2010s with this type of alt rock post hardcore sounds, this is just a really fantastic subversion to my relationship with the sound. There were some nice guitar lines in here. Again, nothing that's really mind-blowing, but this was a bit riffier than we had heard in Cities on Fire. I'd like to hear more of that going forward, but honestly, the more atmospheric style of writing is fine for this too. Um, I don't think I have a preference right now. It was just really nice to hear some riffier ideas from them, just for the sake of, I don't know, change. And yeah, I think that's all the small notes I have. Let's hit the lyrics. Just as the music took a bit of a departure, utilizing a similar sound but exploring that sound differently, here you can certainly tell that the style of writing is Reuben, but the approach is totally different. This is completely surface level, filled with a series of anecdotes and some feelings regarding those anecdotes. It is generally about hate. It's about racism. It's about dividing lines between people. It starts off and says, at school, the choices I made were rock bands and getting good grades, but brains and wearing all black to some of these guys is like a red flag. The taste of anyone's fist is not a good vibe or something I've missed. I was intimidated, assaulted, and for what? I hope they choke. So, discrimination is the key here, and he starts off showing his own discrimination. He was ostracized and othered as a youth simply for enjoying school, or at least getting good grades, might be extrapolating that a bit, and listening to rock and roll. He has a lot of animosity for this. He says, for all of this pain and suffering, it was why? Because I was different than you? And that comes through with the line that we'll see quite a bit in here is, I hope they choke. I wish great pain, discomfort, and possibly death on these people for what they've done to me. The next line says that I shrugged it off in my past. It's growing pains, right? But it's not. It's everywhere. Bullying isn't something just for the youth, it is part of everyday life. He says, one time I was even in New York and someone tried to start a fight with me because they thought I was Jewish. Says, I pray to God she chokes. Altering the line just a little bit to bring it in line with the concept they were talking about, which was religious discrimination. And then we go on to a few others. At one point, he says that he saw somebody covered in blood. That blood was from a black kid that he was beating up. He said he could barely breathe after seeing this incident. Later on, bringing it all together. Your race, your faith, or even just your clothes. They incite people and get them mad at you. It's not safe out. Even goes with the often stated line, well, it's not their fault. They just had a bad childhood. He says, if your mom or dad hit you as a kid, I feel sad for you for sure. It's no excuse though. And he tries to investigate if it might be something larger at work. People grow out of their childhood. It's traumatic. They carry that trauma with them, but as an adult, shouldn't we be able to get past that? And he begins to question society at large. He says, who says it's okay to behave like this? Maybe it's us. We walk away and it's like we just say that it's all right. It's a part of life. You just have to deal with it. He finishes it, interestingly, from a position of weakness. He says, I wish I had the guts to stand up for myself and for others. I hope they choke. Which I think brings a lot of this into perspective. Going back to the very beginning, when he mentioned his childhood bullies, he didn't say, I wish I could beat them up. Doesn't say, I wish I could teach them a lesson. He says, I hope they choke. I hope something outside of my control inflicts that same pain and discomfort to them. And at the beginning, it just kind of seemed like something to say. I hope they choke. It could have been anything, right? But by the end, I think it's important to be something outside of the realms of the narrator, because he does feel powerless to change this. And so the idea of an unseen force, of karma, of a god, fate, maybe even, making these people choke on stuff. it lines up with our final idea of feeling powerless and hoping that something larger can do this because he can't. Yeah, I like the way that came together at the end. Also, though, just a very angry song, lyrically, that fits well with the increased animosity and angst in the music. This is definitely a band who is emotionally connected to their sound. Well, at least right now they are. I don't know if everything's going to end up that way, but the two tracks we've seen explore two different sets of lyrics and use a similar sound but different execution on their music in order to thematically line up with those lyrics. Alright, let's keep moving forward. We're going to check out track number 3 called Suffocation of the Soul. I think this is their longest one. Yeah, 7 minutes. Let's dive into it and see what's going on. Another section led by the bass. Really digging out about them. Yeah, so it's a pretty standard 6/8 or 3/4 kind of going on here, groupings of 3. But the drummer is really playing around with their accents to where it sounds more off kilter than that. Going for the long build-up here, adding tension and distortion over time. Really neat way to introduce this section. Interesting, they're not going into dissonance rut like they did first time around with a similar style. So we actually did this section before without the harshes.
I can't breathe this atmosphere. Wait till I get out of here. I can't breathe this
So we got a 5 going on right here. Groupings of 3 and 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And really dig these odd time signatures. 3s show up on all the tracks so far. We had a 7 last time, a 5 in this one. An interesting style of growth. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in the beginning of this track, but the largest net we have right now, it feels very freeing compared to where we were at. Once again playing around with rhythmic syncopation, particularly on the guitars this time, to play around with the straightforward time signature. Look at the volume. Yeah. That was nice. I really love the way that we utilize the somewhat linear writing once again after our initial verse, chorus, but even that is a bit more complex as we have a pre-chorus and a post-chorus giving us a bit more meat to each loop, each larger grouping of sections. We utilize this though to create a foundation that we expand upon in different directions, and by the end of it we place every single riff that we've played up to this point together on top of each other, creating this incredibly dense wall-to-wall sound. Fantastic. Every bit of that build-up was so good. And see, too, is I had caught on to the fact that we were building up there in our last 2 minutes or so. We began to have more and more layers being put on. But I think what really clicked with me was about a minute to go, and I realized, hey, I recognize that part. Except it was never played with the other part because there's only one guitarist. And here we're just layering up guitar tracks. And I was like, oh yeah, this is where. And then the drummer just starts popping off, and yeah, like everything just clicks there. And I like how it's even foreshadowed a little bit in our second post chorus, I think. It was a section that I pointed out. I was like, we've done this before, but never with the harshes on top. And the idea of taking something from the past and putting an extra layer of sound and maybe even particularly noise on it in ways that aren't necessarily multiplicative in a harmonious sense, but multiplicative in a chaotic sense. Yeah, we did that on a smaller scale earlier in the track, and to see it showcase itself there at the end on a much larger scale is just very cool. And it's one of those things that really only works in retrospect. So the first time around, oh, it's just a variation. And you get to the end though, and you look at it retrospectively, and you're like, actually, it was foreshadowing. It's just so good. This was actually an interesting combination of both of the previous tracks we listened to. It has some animosity to it. It has some anger, some of the noisy dissatisfaction with things, but it also was moodier, very atmospheric, not chill, but laid back, really diving into some more dreary, moodier sections. Uh, Kind of that same. The thing is, too, is that they're kind of the two sides of the same coin, right? The moody dreariness is just a low energy version of that angst. It's still compressed. It's still darker sounds harmonically. Um, the big difference is just how it's performed. Are we dealing with long held out notes, crafting atmosphere, or are we dealing with more impactful, punchy riffage? And I think that's why the atmosphere, not the atmosphere, the production on everything doesn't really need to change to facilitate either side. The production is the same because the feeling is the same. It's just explored from two different perspectives. But there is a disenchantment, I think, that we've seen in both of the tracks so far. One of it just leans a little bit more into anger that the disenchantment brings, and the other one is dreariness or melancholy that the disenchantment brings. And so that may be a running theme throughout this album is getting a new perspective on things and taking a more negative attitude on a topic based on this newfound information and perspective. But we also have a song called Deadly Lethal Ninja Assassin, which just sounds like a good time. That is some campy tongue in cheek titling right there. That's very different from the more serious stuff that we've had in these last three tracks. Although We're All Going Home in an Ambulance kind of has a cheeky thing going on with it too, so it's not as serious as Cities on Fire and Suffocation of the Soul. So I don't know how much weight I can put on title alone. This is the longest track on the album, and I think it's well utilized. We are going to listen to something that's only 10 seconds shyer, but everything else is going to be quite shorter than this one was. It utilizes the time in a way for specifically the build up towards the end, which I've already talked about why that was awesome. It borrows the same concept we just got done listening to with We're All Going Home in an Ambulance, beginning with a rather traditional verse chorus, albeit a bit expanded past that, but still an ABAB, and following it up with more of a linear exploration of sound that ends itself with what I'm going to assume is, much like track 2, a thesis statement repeated over and over in the vocals. Now I gotta bring up the bass. In particular, I'm really enjoying the bass work here. We've had two bass-led sections so far, one somewhere in the mini Rhapsody at the end of track 2, and here our verse. The bass tone is massive. It is large, it's gritty, it takes up a ton of space, but it's also narrower than you would expect given how large it is. I think it probably has something to do with EQing, but it has a nice wide bassiness, but the head of it is a bit more narrow and allows it to have that funky punch, which it desperately needs to cut through the noise. A wide, flat bass tone is usually what makes bass guitars and even the bass kicks for a drum kit. It helps them blend into the music and makes them indistinguishable. You really want that narrow high end to allow it to punch through or cut through the rest of the sound coming in around it. And this has both of them. It is a big sound that takes up a lot of space, but is also narrow enough to cut through the noise and be heard in isolation. I love the bass lines in this track. We have that really nice moving idea at the beginning, but also towards the end, it was a bit harder to hear under all of the layers. We actually had a brand new bass line there at our final build-up point as well, and it was doing nice another moving idea. You know, a one bar lick but not just sitting on a pedal tone. I hate that the bar is so low for bass, but honestly, I mean, I have to keep that bar low or else most bass lines just, I don't have much to talk about with them. And I love how we have moving ideas here. I love how they take the lead. And I love how much space they take up. The guitar can be a big sound, but I think without the bass, it's a bit anemic, primarily because it doesn't fill in the low end the same way. And there's a really nice balance between the two of those instruments throughout these three tracks on the production end of things. Speaking of bass, the bass kicks are kind of weird though. I think I'm acclimating to them. I don't remember it being as big of an issue with this one, but I talked about it in track two, and they're just sort of flat. They're kind of punchy in a blunt way, and they just kind of disperse out into undistinguishable width. It's kind of muddy and flat at the same time. I don't know how to describe it. It's strange. It's not bad. I think it's fine for what they're doing. And like I said, I'm acclimating to it, but it's very different and it's not what I think I would prefer, but also my preference comes from modern production of the bass kick, which, you know, that's like 16 years worth of production evolution. So I don't want to put that weight on them. I think it was fine for the time specifically, and it's still not wrong. It's still not bad, but it does sound a bit too muddy to my ears right here. But you know, the whole thing, I think I meant to talk about this after the first track, and I never got around to it. The whole thing so far is very raw. The guitar tone is massive in a way that feels like it could rupture. The bass tone is massive and has tons of bite in a way that works most of the time, but also is a bit pushing the boundaries of what the bass can carry. It's a lot of shoulder, a lot of weight to put on the shoulder of these two instruments. They have to fill so much space in order to achieve the sound that they want, this overbearing wall of sound, weightiness. And they're doing it with two instruments primarily. The vocals are quite a bit more narrow than any of the guitars, and the drums are, I mean, they have to be narrow. They're percussion. You get your initial crack, your initial hit, your initial attack, and then whatever tail you get off of it, but you don't hold notes out on the drums. They can't be big. You can certainly reverb them. I don't think that's a verb. You can put reverb on them and get big epic theatric drums, but that's not what they're going for here, and it would drastically change everything. So to get the size and power that they wanted out of this album, they put a lot of pressure on these two instruments. And they do sound sometimes like they get pushed to their limits. And I do think that the album so far could be a tad bit richer with a stronger production, a little bit away from the rawness of it while still keeping the grit, and more instrumentation. Granted, different band, different sound. I mean, it just completely changes everything. And some of these sections I think do work primarily because they are so simple. There's three instruments and a voice, and that's all you get. And so limitations breed creativity, which is how we get what this is. But I do wonder if, yeah, that's not a good avenue to go down. We'll just keep it at that. It's a raw sound in general, though. The instruments have a lot of weight put on them. The production is compressed, as I mentioned. It's just very close to me. It's a very small sound sphere, and so it's easy to fill up. It takes a little bit weight off the shoulders of the instruments, but it also means that it doesn't feel as dynamic as it could. They do what they can with it, and as we saw on track one, going from their quietest moment to their highest moment back to back is quite effective. Immediate contrast like that is going to sell the illusion of size, but it really requires a clean palette. If you come off of this from a song with very high fidelity production and a large sound sphere and spaciousness that can still achieve a big sound, particularly if you listen to a well recorded and mixed orchestral album or track or performance. I think you'll find this to be lacking in a lot of ways. As usual, it's not fair to compare two different works, especially possibly time differences between them and also intent. But I do think it's important that when we talk about stuff like this, and I talk about this being a very compressed sound comparatively to other musics in the same genre and even in parallel genres, a lot of metal is also very compressed. It doesn't really stand out as feeling small, but when you listen to other types of music, you may find that it comparatively it kind of shines through. The smallness of it all does shine through. And I do want to bring that up. Music exists far outside of one genre. But the rawness that the production creates and that the performances create, the vocals are not always in tune, the timing's not always correct or perfect, I should say. It's correct in the way that it creates a specific feeling, but it isn't precise, if that makes sense. Uh, Artistically correct, not academically correct. Yeah, can we go with that? It all comes together into something that feels duct taped together. This is a band that didn't have necessarily the resources at hand, or want to at least give off the illusion they didn't have resources at hand, in order to create something that felt more put together. And what that ends up feeling like to me is a very passionate group of people who did the best with what they could and achieve a sound that feels more human because of it. And I think that so far that's what this album feels like to me. It's very grounded, it's very human. There's a lot of discrepancies throughout. I don't want to call them issues, I don't want to call them wrong, but the vocalist is out of tune in parts, doesn't care. That's the way it's supposed to sound. Call it microtonality if you want. No, probably not. I'd still stick to calling it intonation issues. Again, there isn't really a nice neutral term for it, but the vocalist is out of tune. Sometimes people are a little out of timing. The parts don't get mixed properly. It's really hard to speak about this neutrally. The parts don't get mixed in a way that is traditionally palatable. There's a lot of rough edges to this, but it feels very human. Because of that, it almost feels like live recording more so than a pristine studio rendition. And, depending on the message, that might work. We actually had a really interesting conversation in the Haken comments from earlier this week. I mentioned that the song was just a bit too clinical, and as much as I like technical proficiency and high fidelity production, in that specific case, it was a bit too much for me, and I would have liked a little bit more rawness, a little bit more humanity to the performance. And I don't remember who I was talking with, but brought up all sorts of components to this. What's the topic of the lyrics? How is everything being presented? There's a lot of things that go into it. It isn't just simply, oh, this production is raw or not raw enough for my ears. The entire presentation needs to all fit together in a way that feels cohesive for everything. And in this case, I think it does. The topics they're singing about, the way they present themselves, the way they present the music, the way that the vocalist is singing, all of it comes off as something that is amplified by the rawness. This same production absolutely would not work in a technical or progressive metal band. Uh, it most likely wouldn't work. Again, there's more variables at play, and I'm sure there's a band out there who plays really sloppily, but everybody loves because they're technical. You know, there's exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, I think that a lot of the decisions here on the sonic identity of it work well in this group, but wouldn't work well in others because so many things come together to form a cohesive whole alongside the grounded rawness or realness or humanity of the performance. I'm still a little torn on it. Like I mentioned, I do think some things might be improved with a remix and possibly even a re-recording. I appreciate it ends up being a very different thing altogether. But I don't have many issues with it in the moment. I think the song sounds fine when you sort of just shut your brain off and accept it in a complete vacuum. Now, lyrically, this didn't take very long for me to read through. Um, Once again, it's very surface level. I don't think there's a lot of depth and complexity. There's metaphor sometimes, but it's metaphor that is immediately understandable to me, which honestly I'm a fan of. Don't get me wrong, I love technically proficient writing, but it does not help this situation where I need to break things down and find themes between lyrics and music, and if I can't understand the lyrics, it's really difficult to see if there's any connective tissue there. This is a song about disillusionment. So far, I'm 3 for 3 on this. This is about disillusionment of a relationship. The opening says, I thought that I was full of such hope and light and such love, but all my words I wrote them for you, and all my songs I sang them for you. Yet photos of me they all show a staring man I don't know. He goes in to say that he's basically done everything for this other person, snapped his own plans in two. He used to love to sing how he was feeling. He had a soul that burned with beauty, but he doesn't really care anymore. He feels like he's lost it a little bit. In fact, that's the repeated phrase here. I've lost it a little bit. Every song seems to have a mantra or a repeated phrase, something that gets stuck on loop. Maybe it's just a phrase that the vocalist hyper fixates on themselves and they're putting it into music in order to take control over it. I don't know. Every song so far has had a moment where we just sing the same sentence or phrase over and over. And this one says, I've lost it a little bit. Which to me, colloquially, whenever I was growing up, I don't hear it too much these days. And I'm just realizing I don't hear it too much these days because it immediately clicked for me. You say, oh, he's lost it. I've lost it. It tends to talk about your mind. It's an older phrase, a 90s phrase. I heard it a lot in Looney Tunes, maybe even more cartoons when I was growing up. So to say I've lost it a little bit almost feels as if he's saying I've lost my sanity a little bit. But also, we just got done talking about the beauty of his soul, how he would love to sing and create. And it's possible that he feels he's lost that a little bit as well. This takes us to the final stanza. It says, I can't breathe this atmosphere. Wait till I get out of here. Because I've wasted year after year. And smile I may, but it's insincere, my dear. Becoming disillusioned with the relationship and getting ready to end it. Realizing that things aren't as bright and cheery as they once were, or maybe even still feel like in your memories. It's possible that I've lost it a little bit could even refer to the feeling and love he might have for this other person. And I think that's interesting in tandem with the music because the music starts off a bit more aggressive and finds its way down to a state that's a little more chill, laid back. Again, none of it really gets positive, but we do kind of bring it down. And the purpose of bringing it down, of course, is to add the layers and create our ending. But to me, it's sort of like realizing all of this stuff and having that anger kind of build up inside of you until you just kind of break. And as he says, I used to have a soul that burned for beauty, but who cares? And it's just that moment of like, I don't have energy for this anymore, and it just is what it is. And that's what that moment feels like. But you can't stay there forever, and emotion is going to kick back in, and that's the building up. It's remembering all of the little micro things and get on your nerves. Could be a build up to the moment when he says it's over. There's a lot of things the build up could represent, but I still think on a purely musical level it works phenomenally well. Oh my. Okay, so if this song is about being disillusioned with the relationship and remembering the past and remembering all the things about the past that weren't great and deciding to end it because of that and the relationship, utilizing every riff from the history of the song at one point to create a cacophony of sounds is sort of that same feeling of just hyper focusing on all the things that didn't work and having them fuel a decision right now, having it feel overwhelming. Glob, that's good. That's so good. I can just end this right here. Honestly, I don't think the album's going to get much better than that. The way these things line up right there, it's just phenomenal. And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I think my read of that is just as valid as the authorial intent. And if it wasn't their intention, I think honestly they might just take it and be like, yeah, that's what we meant all this time because it's such a good parallel between the music and the lyrics that, again, if it was done by accident, just the gut decision, the instinct to go in that direction, they have it, you know? They have those natural musical instincts to make really great decisions, even if they don't understand the science or theory behind it. All right, I think we're going to do the next two tracks back to back, unless there's something just drastically interesting about track four, because we are an hour and a half into this and only three tracks down. And I am beginning to find less and less to say about their sound in general, which tends to be similar-ish from track to track, which is pretty normal for an album. I tend to have less to say about the music as the album goes on. So, all right, track four and possibly track five.
Shall I bother trying to do it properly? Okay, cool. God, I got an attitude, didn't I? Are you fucking around? Soft little body swollen by the sun, waiting for a break that he knows will never come. Full brittle limbs, weak from underuse, and a head full of words. Long green hair, funny looking dude, big mouth on him and a wicked attitude. And at first impressions, he must seem kind of rude, but he does his best, yeah. Anyway, 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 I wanna be just like you. Get myself a job and a really cool tattoo. I wanna be just like you. Get myself a job and a really cool tattoo. I'm walking home beside you. Hair is long and blonde and your eyes are both bright blue. I wanna be just like you in all I do. Jimmy got drunk on his way to class, swinging from the roof, shot everyone his ass. And if you ask him why, he shakes his head and laughs. There was
A bit of a punkier take on this, both musically and seemingly lyrically.
took him to the room and had a little fun. She's running out of voice, she's telling everyone, and he can't ignore it. Anyway, 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 I wanna be
A higher focus on more melodious and consonant sounds. We haven't had any screaming at all so far. And a heavier focus on the harmony.
walking home beside you. Hair is long and blonde and your eyes are both bright blue. I wanna be just like you. Get myself a job and a really cool tattoo. A really cool tattoo. A really cool tattoo. A really cool tattoo. Don't take it so hard. Really cool tattoo. Don't take it so hard. Cool tattoo. Don't take it so hard. Cool tattoo. Don't take it too hard. Really cool tattoo. Don't take it.
So if you go back and listen to the harmonies on that really cool tattoo part, you'll hear a lot of warbles.
Don't take it so hard.
There's a ton of little micro dissonance intonation going on, where the two vocalists aren't perfectly in tune with each other, but it works. You might not have even noticed it. Yeah, even the bass guitar tone is different on this track. It's just a very different feel.
You're dressed like a Victorian at a swimming pool. You're dressed like a Victorian at a swimming pool. You're dressed like a Victorian at a swimming pool. All in black.
Hey, I hit pause, bro. Let me rewind that because I will definitely forget when we get back to it. I wanted to run the two together, but they just decided to take a drastically different approach with this track, and I suppose we got chit chat about it just a little bit. I don't know that I have a lot to say, but I can't wait. So I kind of guessed that it might be a little lighter given the title, and yeah, I mean it starts off. It sounds like they had just finished a take and it didn't quite work, and so they're still kind of chit-chatting as they start this new take, and there's already sort of a low stakes feeling going on. It's just very lighthearted. Um, just feels like a couple of people in a studio just having fun, trying to get their stuff recorded. And lyrically, what I picked up, it's also kind of light. It's about this person who dresses like a ninja in modern days and just wants to be like them because they're pretty cool. They dress all in black at swimming pools and they got tattoos and uh, and a job, which I guess ninjaing can be a job. I don't know about the verses, but those repeated lines I picked up a few times. And it's kind of bizarre. It's not grounded like the others have been. It's just seems to be a bit fun. Even musically, if we look at it, is a lot of chord work, very pop punk kind of thing going on here. A lot of the harmonies and melodies are handled by the vocals. We have plenty of sections with counterpoint in them, which just introduces a new layer of fun as these bouncy, catchy melodies are run over top of each other and create all the fun contrast that counterpoint can do. The chords are not dark and dreary. They're still a bit angsty. They still have that punk edge to them, but it has some of the poppiness that comes with pop punk, and there's a brightness to it all. There's a fun tongue in cheek, I want to dance to this kind of feeling rather than the punk, I want to punch someone to this kind of feeling. And it's just a very lighthearted track from start to finish. I mean, even there at the end as we were wrapping up, and I think it was their most technical aspect as we had, three people singing, two were doing harmonies, one was doing counterpoint. We had the guitar and bass going, doing their thing. Very complex and layered. The performance of it would certainly be something you need to concentrate on. And one of the vocalists just kind of breaks rhythm to move into a sing-songy spoken word type of cadence. Almost like their singing broke down into more of a rant for a moment, and it kind of gave me a chuckle. A lot of this song puts a smile on my face. And I'll be honest, when the track started, I was a bit apprehensive of it, taken aback, certainly. It's not what I was expecting. But on the flip side, I also was really digging the weight and gravitas of the album. I figured that a lot of this was going to be in that I'm either sad or mad about things I'm noticing today. Um, whether it's large scale, societal levels, or small scale. My relationship kind of sucks that we just checked out in Suffocation of the Soul. Uh, and here we just kind of have something that makes me want to go around skanking, and it's a huge shift in tone. And it took me aback, and it's like, man, just kind of disrupted everything that was going on. But I think it actually kind of works. We just went through three pretty heavy, large tracks. Lyrically, I think our first was one of the heavy. Well, actually, it's the second one's probably our heaviest lyrically. And while the third was probably the heaviest musically, the lyrics lightened up a little bit. And it's just like a relationship that went sour kind of thing rather than the world kind of sucks right now. I think at this point, though, we had a lyrical heavy one, a musical heavy one, and they were like, let's give them a breather. And I kind of appreciate that. One, because as I've mentioned in the past, contrast is king. If you want your louds to be loud, you need to show people what soft is. And if you want your heavy tracks to be dreary or angry and heavy and hard hitting, You need to show what a soft hitting, fun, jocular little nudge in the arm feels like, so that you know what a real punch feels like. Or at least I suppose you know the difference between the two. And so this is a moment for the listener to relax a little bit, find something bright, chill, and have fun, probably because we're going to be moving into some heaviness once again, but also to allow the heaviness to not become the status quo. When dreariness becomes the status quo, it's not dreary anymore, it's just the state of things. And that's how we normalize terrible parts of life, which is actually something that was talked about in track 2 when he said, I wonder why people act this way. Well, maybe it's us. We just kind of move on from things and say that's how life is. It becomes normalized because we don't have anything to juxtapose it to. And so in this album, we create juxtaposition. The dreariness is something to change because it is not the state of things. It is the state of the moment, and it can be changed to something like Deadly Lethal Ninja Assassin. The next track is called Act of Kindness, which could go either way, but track 6 is Crushed Under the Weight of the Enormous Bullshit, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to be a heavy track. Just, track title alone. Uh, After that, a lot of things could go either way, and we might end on something fairly heavy called A Short History of Nearly Everything. That sounds pretty crushing too. So with all that said, lyrics. Because everything must change. I don't quite understand what's going on here. The intro I see is quite divorced from everything else. It was the studio sound. He says, so we're not going to bother trying to do it properly? Okay, cool. God, I've got an attitude, haven't I? Just sort of, you know, it's just the pressure of being in a studio and recording take after take after take. And kind of the worst part is you got to be on a team and you got to be on the same wavelength, but like everyone's going to be on a little different one. And like if you're the perfectionist and like you have someone who's like the exact opposite and they're okay with a bit of a rougher take, like, you can really butt heads, and being close with those people for so long, like there's a lot of stuff that goes into recording and performing with a group. Um, and this just sounds like one of those moments where it's a little tongue in cheek, it's a little sarcastic, but it's also like there's truth coming out of it too. Oh, so we're not going to do it properly this time around, huh? Okay, that's cool. Whatever. Just like expressing your dissatisfaction with the current situation, but doing it in a way that's obviously cool and not rude. But yeah, if you've ever worked on a team project of anything, it doesn't have to be music making. There's going to be these moments. It's impossible to avoid, especially in something like a band where you're practically family. You spend so much time with each other. There's going to be headbutting. Anyways, I view that so far divorced from the rest of the track, but maybe it's not. Verse 1, I don't know. It says soft little bodies swollen by the sun, waiting for the break that he knows will never come. 4 brittle limbs weak from underuse and a head full of words. Long green hair, funny looking dude, big mouth on him and a wicked attitude. At first impression, he must seem kind of rude, but he does his best, yeah? I think it's just describing this person. But then we get to the chorus and he says, anyway, I want to be just like you. Give myself a job and a really cool tattoo. It says, I'm walking home beside you. Your hair is long and blonde. So it's not the funny looking dude with the green hair from our opening verse. This is someone else, which I think the pre-chorus kind of leans into, which I skipped over intentionally. It says, anyway. So there's this dude over here with green hair, and he seems kind of rude, but anyway, I want to be like you. Verse 2. Says Jimmy got drunk on his way to class, swinging on the roof, showed everyone his ass, and if you ask him why, he shakes his head and laughs. He did it for no reason. He just wanted to. A very punk thing to do. Talks about Stacy, and she had sex with her boyfriend and wanted to tell everyone about it. She's wearing out her voice, letting everyone know, it states. Followed by, anyway, I want to be just like you. So these vignettes are completely tangential, I feel, to the core idea here, which is what the chorus is getting at. Now, I think things are starting to click, so bear with me. We're going to take the scenic route to what this track is about. We reach closer to the end, says, don't take it so hard. It's only 'cause I like you. You're everything I wish I could be. And maybe if I'm like you, maybe you'd like me. And that's where things start to click. There is one more little stanza here. Technically, two more little stanzas, but the next one is sort of inconsequential. It's the one you're dressed like a Victorian at a swimming pool. You're dressed like a deadly, lethal ninja assassin. All in black. But I think the idea here is that he has a crush on this other person and doesn't quite know the right way to go about talking to them and bringing it up. And so they kind of bring up these other things in order to create conversation and also as a way to delay the inevitable, the heavy part of asking them out. It could be that I'm reading a bit too far into the album, but based on track 2, where our narrator or vocalist or whoever feels a bit weak, wants to change the world, but doesn't really feel like they can. They feel like they lack the power to do so. It could also be that, as I read it, they're a bit introverted, a bit shy. And so asking out somebody they really like, which is tough for most people, is exponentially more for shy introverts. Uh, and so it's sort of awkward conversation about random things that happen to other people, and it just kind of segues it a little bit. You know, anyway, I kind of like you. Like that's kind of what I get out of this. It's cute in a kind of endearing, shy kind of way. And this bridge I feel really leans into that. And it gets a bit more personal. I don't remember how this line was delivered, but the way I feel is a bit more coy. It's like it's only 'cause I like you and kind of wish I was you. Maybe if I'm more like you might like me. He might not even be saying that to the person. He might be saying it to himself, maybe in a mirror trying to hype himself up. And that's why it devolves from the core idea of I like you to the interpersonal. Maybe if I'm more like her, she might like me some more. That kind of idea. Anyways, the whole track feels very vulnerable in a way, showcasing this person's difficulties with talking to this other person. Um, Interestingly, though, at the end, they do trade gifts. Now, I'm not too sure what his gift is. He says, I made you Trent Reznor spinning on his back with a motorized action. I'm just picturing like an old 90s toy with like those little knobs that you would spin. And then maybe they would like walk, the really loud gears, you know? But like you spin it and it's like an action figure of Trent Reznor, which I can't imagine they ever made. He's a music guy. Like he's not some character in a film or something. Um, and then you just twist it and then it just spins on the floor. That's the only thing I can think of. Um, he says, but anyways, you made me a red and black scarf that I wear around my neck, but it doesn't have any motorization action. Man. just a fun little way to end it, but I do think it's a bit more it's you know what it is? You know what it is. It's hiding shortcomings through comedy. You ever know that person who has no problem laughing at their own mistakes and shortcomings, and it kind of seems like a defense mechanism? Maybe you are that person. Maybe I am that person. That's what this feels like. It's a song version of that, mixed in with a little bit of a feel good ending. It talks about how this person's shy and has difficulty creating conversation. It just really wants to tell this person that they like them, but it's really difficult for them to do. And then they finally do, and they get to exchange gifts, and it's just a really cute ending. Yeah, I'm glad we took the time to explore this one in isolation. All right, from here on out, the songs get progressively shorter: 4.5, 4:10, 3.5, and then 3. And then a Rogue 6, and then a 2.5. So, if anything, the almost 2 hour runtime just to get through the opening 4 songs should drastically cut down as we go through more tracks that are probably similar to what we've listened to and simultaneously are getting shorter, anyways. So, moving on, we're going to check out the next track, An Act of Kindness, which, as I stated, could kind of go either way. Could be a positive song following the footsteps of Deadly Lethal Ninja Assassin, or we could be exploring a bit of tongue in cheek, sarcastic take on that title and looking at something a bit heavier. Let's dive in and find out.
I'm trying to make up my mind. Madness so cruel to be kind. Your mother was sick or blind when she gave a child away. But what she did out of love. She must have meant it as an act of kindness. And having never had a kid myself, I cannot understand the pressures. You must be sick in the head, you need a hospital bed, she said. Probably fed, she said.
Like an alarm going off.
So you were put in the hands of science strangers who understood better than mothers could. Was really for your own good. So we find these ways to justify it all. Are they really working? I'm trying to make up, 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 I'm trying to make up my mind. It gets harder every time. I see a baby mother, I think about growing
It's interesting
up
because the
and
song
having
started out a little bit more in the alt-rock realm,
kids. She must have done it out of love.
but we've shifted more to a hardcore punk kind of thing.
I keep imagining the film girl in a hot tent with less attractive inmates. All of the things that you feel, they're a fucking disease, they said. We diagnosed it with ease, they said. There is no hope of release, they said. So you found yourself inside a prison with no escape. Tied to a gun with thick red tape. Nursing a wound that his mother shared.
Another one of their really rigid rhythmic ideas.
But you wish you could unmake yourself, become something else, to be something awful, to be smoke and shadow, smoke and shadow.
That's interesting. I didn't really listen to a lot of ride cymbal on this album. It also had a lead guitar line, which is unusual. I'm curious about the vocal capacities of all three singers. Obviously, the main singer, the guitarist, has a very wide range, but we've heard background vocalists do cleans and harshes now. Okay. I want so much to be in a new section right now.
Since those first discoveries, I've tried to recreate the feeling I had back then.
You know, speaking of Reznor though, I can feel a Nine Inch Nails influence on some of this now. Even right here, there's some of my personality in less than half-step intervals. Starting to sweat. I don't like this.
Love spent stole my heart was every time I die. I loved every second. But now 3 years gone by. When I heard worship and tribute, thought my dreams come true. But listening to most other bands, it seems they all did too. All this 80s indie, it sounds like shit to me. 'Cause I don't like Joy Division, I don't like Morrissey, or their new impersonators. Kings of MTV, circling at the table, the fucking enemy.
Just a massive tone right there. That's clever. That's clever. So, what was being said there, the repeated phrase was, I can't move on. But on can't, they would hold it out. And the length they would hold it out increased every time the phrase came around. Eventually, the vocals, harsh vocals came in. We also had a harsh vocalist behind me that was singing something completely different, I think. But something that I thought was really cool within this wasn't just the idea of holding on to the note can't so that the song literally doesn't move on. But if you listen to the bass line, it's all eighth notes. Ba 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 until we hit can't, and it just holds the note out. We even lose the momentum in that instrument. It wasn't changing notes all that often, anyways, but it was giving us frequent attacks, and it has decided to just stay on this one note rather than continue to play the eighth note run and just not changing the pitch with everybody else's staticness. It gets stopped in its tracks completely instead. So that whole ending right there is rather clever, just another nice way of pairing the lyrical themes with the musical ones, exploring similar vibes throughout. Um uh, okay, so in the past we've talked about one of the things. Let me start this over. One of the things that I get complimented the most on, I think, in the comment section is that I give everything a fair shake, even if I don't like it, and that I tend to still walk away from things with appreciation, even if I would never listen to it again. And I'm glad that this is conveyed. I'm glad that people pick up on this. It is one of the things I stand by the most in the past few years as an evolution of a musician and music listener. If you go back and watch my very first reaction, I was a little dismissive of it. It was a pop track, and I think I still gave it a fair ish listen, but it's certainly not where I would eventually take my analysis and criticism going forward. It certainly showcases who I was almost 5 years ago now. 4 years ago now? Yeah, four. Golly, it is almost next month. We'll hit the fourth year complete. Anyways, I like to keep a division when I'm listening to music between the analytical objectiveness and my casual subjectiveness, in that I attempt to view music from the perspective of not is this good or is this right, but what makes it good and what makes it right. Even if I don't personally find it good to listen to or correct. And I do have criticism sometimes where I say I would do something a different way, but I also understand that, as we've talked about in this video itself, drastically changes the art itself and it doesn't become their work. It would become my interpretation of their work. It follows very much in the perspective of arranging, or probably a more colloquial term would be a cover or an adaptation. And so this is one of those tracks I think that very clearly showcases this. On a subjective level, I hated so much of this. But objectively, and I think more importantly in this topic, artistically, everything that was done here was perfect, and I would not change a thing. I think the most interesting part about this is not necessarily the first half's focus on fairly exclusively dissonance, but where they went from there. Halfway through, they decided to embrace a level of consonance that was not present at the beginning, and by the end of the track, we had almost completely removed those exceptionally abrasive sounds. We still explored some levels of dissonance towards the end, especially with all of the layers there, and the fact that they're not too focused on harmonic consonants to begin with, but it was quite a bit more palatable than anything we heard in our opening 2 minutes, and it almost feels like a resolution or an acceptance of such, and I'm curious what the lyrics are going to be like, particularly in that back half. What do we change that alters our perspective? Because the opening is, it's just dissonance. We have a gnarly, massive bass tone, and we have the guitars consistently playing two notes, a half note apart, possibly even one string detuned a little bit in order to achieve a greater level of dissonance. And the next dyad that we hear is just that same interval, a half an octave higher. That is our entire opening 2 minutes. More layers, more darkness, more heaviness, but all of it still built primarily on those really tense dyads. And even when the vocal harmonies come in with that lower line, they are atonal in a sense. I had mentioned that they're microtonal in a way that they're presenting themselves at less than a half step apart. It introduces a ton of tension. Primarily that warbliness you get when two instruments are out of tune. It is a song that makes me very uncomfortable. My palms began to sweat. I don't know what kind of faces I was making. I'm not usually a face guy, right? I feel like when I go back and try to find good pictures of me to put on my thumbnails after I make a video, a lot of it is just me taking it in, whether I'm staring blankly into the distance or have my eyes closed or have my thinking face on, which I didn't even really know I did this too often until I made the video and I realized how often I listen to music like that. Um, I don't really have the wow faces. I don't have the clickbait faces. There are some songs I think that pull it out of me, and it's going to be really interesting to go back through this video. I think if I remember, I'm going to specifically check for my reactions during this track to see if anything is good for the thumbnail, because I don't know what I was making, but it was not my normal faces. It just made me so uncomfortable. I don't know. It's just, I don't like dissonance to begin with, and they really lean into it. But I think I will have a good time later. We're gonna have a little aside right here, a little story time with Bryan. I don't really have time for it, but I think I want to do it anyways. So, my sister is even more stringent about palatability and contemporary music decisions than I am. She enjoys pop punk. Huge fan of like Paramore and The Used. She also listens to a lot of electronica and modern pop. Um, just, a little bit between the rock and the pop world, kind of crosses over, more rock sometimes, more pop, really loves where they meet in the middle, but kind of has that very narrow view on consonants, even more so than mine. I don't mind a little bit of dissonance. She doesn't mind screaming every once in a while. She's a fan of The Used, after all, but she doesn't listen to music with a lot of screaming. She likes it as a spice. And we listen to some really fun stuff here on the channel, and occasionally I'll be like, hey, this is really up your alley, and I've shown her some stuff in the emo area that we've checked out, some post-hardcore that we've checked out, and those finds are good. I don't know that she's ever dug into them more, but she's like, that's, oh, the latest one was the Venetian Fair. I showed her that, and we listened to snippets from like half the album. She's not an album person; she's like a playlist person. But she was like curious what they did. Anyways, though, but like the other 70% of the time, which really makes it a grab bag for her, is when I play her the weird stuff. Ethel doeth. Uh, I'm gonna play her this track. um, I played her that jazzy Between the Buried and Me track, we did a drum cam of it years ago. I don't remember what it was called. Just because like it was like post-hardcore, mathcore with like super jazzy stuff. I play her the weird things. And so she's really apprehensive when it comes to me saying, hey sis, I got something I want to show you. But she doesn't say no because sometimes there's gems. And I know it's a bit cruel, I suppose, but just kind of chucking in that sibling rivalry kind of thing. Uh, but we're good. We're pretty tight, I'd say, as far as siblings go. So like it's all in good fun. She doesn't get mad at me about it. But I just realized it is a little cruel that I weighed it so heavily. But the thing is I'm going to show her this track because she's going to hate it more than me, and I think she's going to get more of a spine-chilling, nails on a chalkboard reaction than even I did. And some of you may enjoy watching the faces I make, and I'm going to enjoy watching the faces she makes. All in good fun, I suppose. I'm waiting for the day though when she's like, "Nope, I'm not taking any more of your suggestions." Uh, that'll be the day. Anyways, little story time with Bryan. But yeah, that was the first thing I thought of when this song came on and we were in this mode for so long. She's not gonna last 10 seconds. I'm not gonna have to put myself through much of it again. But yeah, that was the first thing I thought. I was like, I gotta play this for my sister. It's just something that's gotta happen. Is there anything else in this track? No, I don't think so. An Act of Kindness was fairly straightforward. We had an introduction that was more aligned with the alt rock sound that we had heard on the opening few tracks, but quickly moved into more of a hardcore punky thing going on that tied it nicely back to the track before it, the Ninja Assassin. So I thought it was a nice little middle ground. They introduced some pretty much full on pop punk stuff and kind of reel it back in a little bit after giving us a lot of alt rock in the opening. Something I do want to talk about though right here is this concept I wrote down called expansion through repetition. And it didn't click with me until this track, but there's been a lot of sections on this album so far where they will go into one of those mantra modes and the vocals will just repeat the same phrase over and over and over. And this is where the layering happens in a lot of tracks. We get the harmonies on it, and then we get the harshes behind it, and then we might get the counterpoint around it. And this is just the layering happening on the vocal level. If you listen to the drums, the guitar, and the bass, you'll also find that the songs in these sections tend to evolve and progress through an opening idea, which might be a bit more anemic or less developed, and transfer into not usually an evolution of where we were, but even moving into brand new sections entirely. It's actually a really clever way to disguise a transition, as I think most people, even myself included, and I'm trying not to do it, but they suck me into it, listen casually and stick to the vocals, as they are not only the focal point sonically in the production, but there's so much of it going on that it really takes all the spotlight. It takes a lot of effort for me to say, don't listen to the vocals right now. They got cool stuff going on. They're layered too, but there's things going on underneath them I need to check out as well. Um, and yeah, it's very cool for them to stick with these ideas for such a long time until they hit the loop and they're like, okay, just massive evolution, massive uh, iteration right now. Let's do it. Every 4 bars, every 8 bars, change it up, put a new line in, add some new notes, change up a lick entirely, but only for one instrument. And just this rapid fire mutation going on in these sections. And then, it was very cool for me to notice this, and it clicked with me at the moment when they decided to utilize this technique for storytelling purposes, which was the we can't move on anymore or whatever. I forgot what the line was now. And then utilizing this layered evolution idea to increase the weight of the inability to push forward, which we already discussed at the beginning of this analysis section. So I was like, oh, that clicked. That's something they do. Oh, snap, they're actually doing it thematically right now. Is like, I'm really glad I figured it out here because if not, I might have missed that. Just very cool little thing there. Um, I think that's about it for this part. We're gonna hit some lyrics on both of these and push forward. We're halfway done with the album, track wise, and over halfway done time wise. So we're in the back half now. Probably looking at about a 3 hour 23-minute video. I know it's very specific, but I think I'm getting better with that. All right, lyrics. I didn't expect the lyrics to be quite this. The song is about a mother sending their child away to a hospital or an institution of some sort in order to get made better, whatever that is. At one point says, you must be sick in the head. You need a hospital bed. She said, properly fed. She said, or you're going to wind up dead. So you were put in the hands of science, strangers who understood better than mothers could. It was really for your own good. The idea that people make tough decisions, and more particular, as we will see with the inversion of the title, Act of Kindness, that it actually typically isn't. It's about justification. As he says, see, we find these ways to justify it all. Are they really working? By the end, he says, I understand the idea that ADD is an imbalance. Depression, that is an imbalance of chemicals too. It makes sense. But couldn't you argue that everything is? Joy, fear, anger, sadness. Can you diagnose love? Loss? See, we find these ways to justify it all, but is it really working? And so instead of giving this person the care that they needed, particularly from a parent living in a safe environment, their house, not a sterile hospital or a mental hospital, even. At one point, even mentions um, they really started talking about all the negativity of it. It says, so you found yourself inside a prison with no escape, tied to a gurney with thick red tape, nursing a wound that is mother-shaped. When can I go back home? I want to make a call. All these pills do is make me sleep. 1, 2, 1, 2. The idea that the existence here is not healthy. It is not conducive to growth. Is about diagnosing something and not someone. It removes the person from the equation and takes away the humanity from the entire experience. And it asks us, what is an act of kindness? Is it just a justification? And who does it really help? Now, what I find interesting here is there are no annotations, but this feels a little more than a distant exploration of a topic. This feels very personal, very close. Whoever wrote the lyrics, I think, has experienced this with a friend, family member, someone. They have seen them get put away into an institution like this in order to help them and watch them deteriorate. I think it's interesting too that there's always an attempt to see it from the other side. As we saw with track two, we're all going home in an ambulance. He recognized that some people lash out in anger and have prejudices due to the way that they grew up. He says it's not an excuse, but I do feel sorry for you. There is this attempt to see it in a bit more depth than the two dimensional, this is right, this is wrong kind of thing. And there's a few stanzas in here where he begins to question it. He says, I've never had a kid myself. I can't understand the pressures. It gets harder every time trying to make up my mind whether this was justified or not. She must have done it out of love. It must be an act of kindness. I must believe that it was. Because otherwise, this pain was done for cruelty reasons. It has to have been done out of love. But the way that it's written here doesn't make it feel like he does believe it. It's just the most rational conclusion. Anything else breaks his idea of what parents are. Again, attempts to see it from another angle. Obviously, he is a very negative perspective on this entire incident, but always tries to see it from another way. Maybe he's not right. Maybe he's not wrong. But it's worth exploring in depth, and I like how it's presented in the songs. But yeah, that was a bit of heaviness to it that I wasn't expecting. Especially given the track kind of moving towards more of that punky style. It wasn't quite as dancey as Ninja Assassin, but it wasn't as dreary and overbearing as anything else we had heard. It kind of sat in the middle ground there, and lyrically, I think it's one of the heavier ones on the track so far. It certainly deals with heavy topics, and at the end, there's no answer. He doesn't decide to make a decision for the listener. He poses both sides, and at least to me, certainly leans more towards one. It feels like that might be his perspective on it, but he doesn't tell you how to think. He leaves it open ended with multiple questions in the final stanza. Now, oh, the more that I listen to their lyrics and really pay attention to what they're doing, I think the more this album is really clicking with me. You see, there's a rawness to the sound that we've already explored. The way the instruments sound, the production of it all, the timing of the performances, and the lack of perfect intonation that's present throughout. But there's also a humanness to the lyrics. This one feels very much like your average Joe wrote it, which I think really leans into that undercore scene well. This isn't some rock star writing about this. This is just somebody who could be your neighbor, playing in a garage band, writing about their experience with music growing up. And I think that makes it very personal on a level that clicks with a lot of people. And that's one of the difficult things with art is how do you expose yourself in a way that feels universal? It's kind of sucks because it puts you in a position to say I'm unique, but I'm just like you. And I think it's really easy to lose yourself in that duality. You are an individual who is supposed to sing about things that connect with everyone. And if they connect with everyone, does it really make you unique? And if you're not unique, then why are you the one who gets to make money playing music when anyone else could be doing it? And I think that's accurate for a lot of art. And I think it's where could honestly be a strong foundation of um, imposter syndrome. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but this duality is certainly not helping it. And so we have this track that feels very grounded. What it's about is presumably the vocalist and their exploration of music. It says, I still remember when I first heard the riff that opens Nevermind up. My neck hairs stood up stiff. Nevermind was from Nirvana, and the opening riff was Smells Like Teen Spirit. I think everyone here watching this video knows what that riff is. I don't even have to sing it poorly in order to jog your memory. You probably know what it is. He says his neck hairs stood up stiff the first time he heard it. And since those first discoveries, I've tried to recreate the feeling that I had back then, but nothing sounds that great. And I kind of took this in two ways. One, as a music listener, I've tried to recreate that feeling of unparalleled discovery, finding gold for the first time. How do I find music that makes me feel the way that riff did? But I think simultaneously it works on the level of music creation and wearing your influences on your sleeve. This song in particular, super dissonant as it was, heavily reminded me of Trent Reznor's Nine Inch Nails, particularly, what was that album we checked out that had, I can't remember the name of that song. Dang, I'm completely blanking out on it. Anyways, it was like the most prolific song. It was on the radio all the time. It was a pretty big album, very influential on people. Just very gritty and noisy and grimy, and this song embodies a lot of that. And Trent Reznor has been pulled up in the lyrics already. So we have that little bit of inspiration to wear on the sleeve. But there's also just a lot of strong, grungy, alt rock, post hardcore sounds in here. Some of it does sound very original in the way that it's pulled together, but at least for me, I can clearly hear these similarities to other bands of the 90s and 2000s. This sounds like a band who wants to make what their favorite bands make in their own style, but they're heavily influenced by them, and they could never break out of the underground scene. They could never become, for other people, what bands like Nirvana were for them. I've tried to recreate the feeling, but nothing sounds that great. Nothing I do ever lines up to what they did. But simultaneously, none of the music I'm finding today gives me that same heightened elation that Nirvana did. And I really like that. I don't know if it was purposefully written so vague to encompass both viewpoints, but I'm a real big fan that it does. Because one of the cool things about being an artist is that you're also somebody who participates in the consumer side of artwork. I mean, just because you write music doesn't mean you don't listen to music anymore. And it's a perspective that, unlike a music listener, is something unique to somebody who also works within the art field. Anyways, says I buy a lot of records and I take most of them back because I feel disappointment after just one track. Now that's something. The dude has a very specific idea of what he wants out of music, and if he doesn't get it, well, he moves on. He says the last band that stole my heart was Every Time I Die. I loved every second, but now 3 years have gone by. 3 years since you found a record that really clicked with you. He mentions worship and tribute the second album from the band Glass Jaw. He says, I thought my dreams come true, and listening to most other bands, it seems they all did too. I guess a lot of people really like that album. He says, but all this 80s indie stuff is garbage. And this is what cracked me up because I caught this specific line. He says, because I don't like Joy Division. And I didn't know the context for it. It just seemed like this random sentence that was screamed, I think, too, at this point. And I was like, dang, why you really got to call out Joy Division? I mean, I can't say that I really enjoy their music, but it's good. It's not my cup of tea, but I mean, dang, just calling them out like that. But no, it makes sense now. He also says, I don't like Morrissey or their new impersonators, the kings of MTV, suckling at the teat of the NME. And I can't move on. Just really stuck in this sound. Bands made it, and bands have moved on from it. Some bands might still capture that feeling. They might still have a little bit of that influence from that era, but everybody moves on. Some bands move on a bit more drastically than others. Look at Bring Me the Horizon. But even the bands who stick generally with their sound tend to still explore it in new ways. The process of art is expansion and growth and evolution, not stagnancy. And I think that part of that understanding is in this track. I don't think it's ever stated explicitly, but there is a sadness that he understands that it's not music's job to sit with him, but that he can't move on with the music. And it's not, to me, this isn't an old man shouting out the clouds, oh, music was better in my day. It's a sadness that he's stuck in his ways. It's a recognition of that fact, putting the blame on himself rather than the music for getting worse. Now, granted, he still, well, actually, no, he doesn't outright call anything garbage. He says it sounds like garbage to me. So he takes the blame. I really like that that's there. He says he feels disappointment. Again, that's on him. He's feeling the disappointment. The album itself is not disappointing. He feels disappointment. He doesn't like the way it sounds. And he takes that and he owns it. And I love that. It's very honest, but it isn't degrading. And I think that's just a really refreshing take in the world of music. Now, what's really interesting here, I didn't catch this, and I don't know that even I could have caught it in the final section with all the layers and everything. One of the vocalists, or one of the people singing, they can be heard screaming Razorlight over and over in the background of this section of the song. I did mention, no, that was on, I think that was on Deadly Lethal Ninja Assassin when I mentioned that I heard something in the background but couldn't make out what it was. Um, Apparently, Razorlight just received endless praise in the early 2000s, and I guess they weren't a big fan of it. But I guess that's a little tongue in cheek right there. Might be one of those tracks that I don't know by name, but I've probably heard given it was so big. But yeah, and it's called Crushed Under the Weight of Enormous Bullshit. What? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to take the title. I guess there's a few ways to take it. Some that put the weight on him, not being able to move. Maybe he recognizes there's some things that he should be able to get over and enjoy different musics, but can't. But I guess it could also be pointing towards the music industry, that the music, good music, good music is being crushed under the weight of all the red tape. The only music that gets made now is garbage because of all the weight that's put on it to perform on MTV. I guess you could read it either way. All right. Let's hit two more. We got Good Luck and Agony Agatha. Let's dive into these and see what's going on.
Long ago, I woke up early.
Straightforward 4/4. Little bluesy, downtrodden sounds, but not overbearing. And I think this is the first acoustic guitar we've heard too.
So he sent me away. I wanted to say, okay. Well, good luck. I hope I never see you again. Good luck, yeah.
Yeah, such a 2000s thing.
There was this girl I slept with. She got inside my head. When I say slept, I don't mean just sex. I mean we shared a bed. I thought that we were married. I thought we'd be okay. But then she made it clear.
I like the cross stick on the snare. That's a nice way to give it the crack, that snap, without the extra emphasis of the snare hit. Allows it to stay light.
Space inside my heart, and I think we have grown apart. So go take a hike, and I was just like, alright. Good luck. I hope I never see you again. 'Cause if this is goodbye, then good luck. Good luck. I hope I never see you again.
'Cause if this is goodbye,
I hope that you die.
'cause if you hurt me, I will hate you. It's just as simple as that.
It's not mature and it's not progressive. That doesn't alter the fact that
If you hurt me, I will hate you. If you hurt me, I will erase you. If you hurt me, I will hate you. If you hurt me, I will forget
I will
you.
forget you.
Yeah, just some straight up emo sarcasm. That guitar was a drastic departure, but the piano's an even stranger choice here.
Just a big bass line and drums. Got guitarists sucking their thumbs. 4-bar or 2, that's how to do it. Press the keys, it makes it swell. I don't pretend I can play very well, but I like what piano brings to it. Before the idea gives way, I press
Oh,
the chord
man.
and I press play. 'Cause like a pain in my head, it won't let go. Like a beast in my bed, I can't say no. Like a crack in the windshield of my soul, it is Agatha.
was just a fun track in the same vein as the Ninja Assassin.
Just a verse and a chorus now. In my brain, playing around and around. And around on a loop under my body. Sometimes when I'm trying to write songs, imagine I turn the radio on. And think about what I'd like to hear on it. Thumping drums and chords, that's what I'm all about. And bass and keyboards, and you got everyone rocking out, yeah! It's like a pain in my head, it won't let go. Like a beast in my bed, I can't say no. Like a stain on the carpet of my soul, it is agony. Agatha, it is
Yeah, I think it's interesting that where we're at right now, we've kind of pushed away from the more progressive, experimental tendencies we've had throughout. The tracks have been longer. They've been more varied. They've explored multiples of them, explored structure outside of the ABAB CB pattern, introducing these little rhapsodies after our second chorus. Um, we kind of put all of the heavy tracks lyrically at the front of the album as well. And so right here on track 7 and 8, we just have very straightforward songs. We got a nice little acoustic ballad with Good Luck, a little bit of the Midwest emo sensibilities going on there, and this track was straightforward post-grunge. Very simple composition, chord-based, digging into specific atmosphere with some crunchy vocals. Um, and sort of I feel like I've brought them up a few times in the past few months, but my go-to, how would I describe this? Like the main, the middle point, like ground zero for what post-grunge is and what I relate sounds to in order to figure out, is this post-grunge? Which, post-grunge is like all postings, sort of a big umbrella, but um, Smile Empty Soul. And they've been fairly consistent with their sound even over the last 20 years or so. They put out an album last year, I think it was. I don't suggest it. Their older stuff is better, especially lyrically. This one isn't that strong and kind of goes in some weird directions. But, anyways, their sound generally hasn't really changed. So when I hear something that reminds me of it, I'm like, oh, we're post Nirvana style grunge. And that's exactly what this feels like to me. And so they're simplistic tracks lyrically, they're simplistic tracks musically, which is how I was able to listen to some lyrics and pick up some of the simplicity in that. And I think the more important part is that they're razor focused. Everything prior to this has been about exploring a sound through multiple sounds. You got away with words, Bryan. um, how do we explore sadness through heavy distorted guitars, through clean vocals, through heavy vocals, through riffs, through atmosphere? How do we explore anger through all of that as well? And so we open up the album with these multifaceted tracks, and at this point, they're like, we're done with that. Let's just write a song that does one thing. Let's write two songs that do just one thing. And I'll be surprised if Well, their next track is the second longest on the album, but our final two are on the shorter side of things, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also stick more to this single idea concept. This feels more like the alt rock, grungy, punky style that they sort of lean on. Even post hardcore, I think, is a bit more simplistic. They do the one thing they do very well, and they do it a lot. And so the variety found at the beginning of this album is something that they might have been exploring brand new. For the most part, it works very well. If this was the first album they tried to explore new avenues on, again, their gut, their intuition on writing music is solid. But these later tracks right here, even a little bit of Crushed Under the Weight, feel like something they're more comfortable with. I would wager, if I was a gambling man, that this is probably what their older albums sounded like. Granted, these are two very different sounds. Good Luck and Agony Agatha. One's grunge, one's like emo ballad stuff. Um, but the singular focus, do one thing and do it well and get it done with quickly, is probably what a lot of their older stuff was based around. They might have some ballads, they might have some more angsty tracks, they might have some grungier stuff, some post-hardcore stuff. Maybe they still explore some alt rock. Maybe there's still a lot of variety, but I would wager that most of the tracks focus on one specific thing and that the variety comes across the multitude of tracks, not a variety of sounds within a singular. Um, with that said, this track was fine, very straightforward, lots of chords, um, lots of bass work. I love how he just described most of it, really taking a book out of, is that Hallelujah? I can't remember, Leonard Cohen? I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's who wrote it. Um, where, he's describing the chord progression as he plays it. The same thing happens here. He says, we'll start with bass and drums because that's what I love. We'll throw in a little bit of keyboard because I think it sounds cool. And he starts playing the keyboard at that point. And he talks about how he just loves driving bass and chords, and that's what the song is. And so it's a song about what he wants to do as a musician. At one point, he even says sometimes he turns the radio on or imagines turning the radio on and figuring out what he would want to hear if he did, and making that music because you have to make what you want in the world. Which I think works very well coming off of Crushed Under the Weight, where he talks about not really liking a lot of the music that's out there. If you don't like something that's out there, make your own. And that's kind of always been the old American adage, which is true in a small capacity. Opportunity certainly is required for it, but the idea is plausible, especially more so in the music world with consumer technology and software coming down in price. It's less of a hurdle and more accessible than ever to create music these days, which wasn't super true back in 2007, but was still semi-true, and it's only become more true. If you don't like the music on the radio, make your own. There's also limitations to that. You don't have to be a musician or a composer to not like the music on the radio. I am not an artist, but I could tell you if I don't like a certain artwork or a film. I have no means to make a film that I would like. But if I find I don't like a lot of film out there, I think that's still valid criticism. But I think it's interesting that he sort of takes the ideas he explored on track 6 and furthers them here. And we get to see a little bit of the creative process too. It's just a very cool song overall. Good Luck didn't really have a lot going with it. It was mostly, well, rather small compared to everything else. We had the drums, very light, closed hi-hat, cross stick, rare bass kick usage. The bass led most of the track. I love the harmonies in here. I love the second vocalist. I went and looked it up while the track was going on because I was curious. As far as I knew, there were 3 men in the group, and this was a distinctively feminine voice, which doesn't mean that it wasn't one of them, but it just seemed a bit out of place compared to everything else. And no, it had a featured vocalist, Hannah Lou Clark. She was the lead singer of Arthur and of the band Foe. Both of them are alt bands. And it looks like after that, she went solo. She's had a few albums with just under her name. Oh wait, yeah. If I'd read the paragraph just a little bit longer, um, in 2012, she decided to set out into some solo work just under her own name. But yeah, I really liked her voice. I don't know if it was particularly the way that her timbre reflected everything in this album. I mean, we talk about contrast, right? All the vocals so far have been gritty against gritty backgrounds, and we have a ballad with just a very beautiful, clear voice against the production we've heard everywhere else. This is pristine comparatively. It's not a robotic, perfect performance, but compared to everything we've heard so far, this might as well be spotless perfection. And so that's certainly going to change my perception of it. If I had heard this in isolation, I think I might have a reaction I could trust more, but I didn't have a palate cleanse. I have to compare this, whether I like to or not, to everything that's come around it. Especially since we had just come off of Crushed Under the Weight, which was the gnarliest track on the album so far. So I don't know if I really enjoyed it because it was contrast, or if there was some stuff in her delivery that just really worked for me. And there's also the element that she was playing with or singing with the band and not with her own bands. So there's a chance that I just really like her timbre in relationship to their instruments. But, regardless of all that, I still think I'm going to pull her album list off to the side and dig a little bit into her works. I'd never heard of her. I've never heard of those bands, Arthur and Foe. I don't even think I've seen them in passing, so I don't know if the community's too familiar with them either. They're older though. Arthur was '05 and Foe was 2011. Oh, that's not too bad though. '05 is definitely a bit on the older side. But yeah, if anyone else was curious, and or enjoyed that vocal performance, you're looking for Hannah Lou Clark. But yeah, it was a straightforward ballad. I liked the harmonies in it. It sounded gorgeous. The timbre change is just really nice, as I just talked about. I mean, it's just a brand new sound. I mean, it's like if you're listening to an album and 30 minutes in, they add some violin work or something. You're like, man, that is nice. It's a sonic change. It allows your brain to get something new going on it. Um, I think that's enough there. I mean, like I said, they're straightforward tracks. I don't know that I have a lot to talk about specifically regarding them, so let's push on with some lyrics. As I mentioned, with Good Luck, it's just a very straightforward, bit of sarcastic track in here. The opening story with the male vocals says, I woke up for a job that I used to love. One day, though, I got fired. The boss made it clear he didn't need me anymore. When I was on tour, he had to hire somebody else in to fill my spot anyways, so I like this part though. He says, in a few words in his defense though, there was no pretense and it made perfect business sense. So he sent me away. And I wanted to say, okay, good luck. I hope I never see you again. We have a second situation. This is where Hannah comes in and sings. Says that she was in a relationship that she thought was it. Says, I thought we were married. I thought we'd be okay. Just very tight. Says, but she made it clear she didn't feel that way. And so I was just like, all right, good luck. Hope I never see you again. Because if this is goodbye, I hope that you die. Just really wishing negative thoughts on him. And of course, when the two vocalists come in together, it says, because if you hurt me, I'll hate you. It's just as simple as that. It's not mature. And it's not progressive, but it doesn't alter the fact that if you hurt me, I'll hate you. I'll erase you, I'll hate you, and I'll forget you. And it's just a very straightforward song. It says all of this stuff, all of this really mean stuff. The whole thing of good luck, little tongue in cheek there. Fine, I'm not good enough. Good luck then. Good luck finding someone else better than me. That kind of idea. So there's a tongue in cheek aspect to it, a little bit of sarcasm, but also there's the brightness of it. The song is kind of bright. It's slower, it's balladic, but it's not dreary. And it's like, if this is goodbye, well, I hope you die. And you kind of say it with a smile on your face, that kind of vibe. Uh, and it's just super sarcastic, and I love it. I love it so much. And for Agony Agatha, I got no any extra. I didn't get any extra depth reading the lyrics. I picked up on pretty much everything just from listening to the track. The opening, just a big bass line and drums. Got guitarists sucking their thumbs, 4 bar or two. That's how to do it. Play some keys, it makes it swell. I don't pretend I can play very well, but I like what piano brings to it. Before the idea gives way, I press record and I press play. So you get an idea in your head. It's pretty simple. I don't know that I'm not saying I can play very well, but I can play music. And before the idea leaves, I've already got it recorded. Says just a verse. Well, we had gone through the chorus. I'm going to skip it for a second though. Next verse comes in. He says, just a verse and a chorus now in my brain playing round and round. Hang around on the loop further, my buddy. Sometimes when I'm trying to write songs, I imagine I turn the radio on and think about what I'd like to hear. Thumping drums and chords, that's what I'm all about. A bass and keyboards, it should get everyone walking out. So yeah, it goes through his recording process. How things pop up in his head, how they get stuck in his head, how he feels like he has to get them out. So he does, he records them. It's very loop based. There's a lot of repetition in his writing, heavy bass and drums and chords. That's what he likes to write, that's what he likes to listen to. And he's a big fan of the keyboard, even if it isn't always great. The keyboard in this particular song was a very interesting timbre. Very different from its presence in other songs, and I'm kind of curious. I mean, he liked it. That's why he put it in there. He's explaining that to us in real time here. I did find it to be a bit odd, though, but it was fine. It grew on me. So we get to the chorus, though, and this is the part where he talks about it's not really him making music. He just can't get this stuff. He can't let this stuff stay in his head. He says, it's like a pain in my head and it won't let go, like a beast in my bed. I can't say no, like a stain on the carpet of my soul, like a crack in the windshield of my soul. You just need to deal with it. And he deals with it by recording it. He can't not make music. It's a curse to him. I think it's a really interesting way to go about it because it's kind of similar to me. I've said this in the past, but for me, making music is a way that I sort through emotion. If you look at most of the music that I've actively promoted in the past, it's been stuff that has been emotionally resonant for me. Most of the other stuff that I've packed away into the experimental ideas playlist on my composition channel is, I think, less emotionally engaged, but more technically involved. They're songs that I have sought out to make rather than that my body has made. And because of the way that I typically make music, a lot of it is an idea that just gets stuck in my head and I can't get it out. And it just sits there until I record it. And so I have a ton of ideas just recorded. And, if I play them back, my brain will add stuff to it. And then that's how the song builds. That's the same thing with the reactions, and I talk about, oh, I would have done this, or I would have loved to hear this. That's because that's what my brain did. I can't turn that off. My brain just makes music all the time. It's kind of annoying. And the worst thing is if I'm in a place where I can't record or jot it down, because there really isn't great software for uh, sheet music in Android. There is some, it's fine, it gets the job done, but it is not great. So like if I'm away from my computer, it's just really difficult for me to get it out of my head, and it'll just sit there for hours and hours like a stuck record. Like how people get songs stuck in their head, or like a lyric line will get stuck in their head and just can't get it out until you listen to it. That's me, except with stuff I've never heard before, and I can't get it out until I play it. So like I connect with this song a lot. And I think that's fascinating or fantastic. Both F words work. I'm not too sure about the Agony Agatha thing though. He says it is Agony Agatha. There's commas there, as if he's speaking to Agatha and telling her that it's Agony. But at the end, there's a couple of interstitial lines that come in between it is Agony Agatha, which is repeated over and over and over. We hear, oh Agatha, it's so amazing, and it's so good. And those are very suggestive things to say, talking about this. And I don't remember anything in the music being a bit suggestive. So I'm kind of curious what the whole Agony Agatha thing is, what it means to the vocalist. Because to me, I don't know, I don't get anything out of it. Also, I think my earlier guess for how long this video is going to be cut short a bit. I don't think we're going to make the 3:23 mark. All right, we have 3 more tracks ahead of us. I'm not sure how this is going to run. Just going to hit it and find out. Moving up next, we have 3 Hail Marys. Half volume techno.
I am regret, I am doubt,
Full volume
I am
bass.
alone, I am without, I am despair, I am guilt, I am the sand on which I built, I am malaise, on wasted youth, I am aggression, of ugly truth, I am refusal, I am attack, I got the world set on my back.
Alright, we're going to bump it up in 2 bars.
I am revolt, I am abuse, I am
Yeah, see what I mean about this being comfortable?
I'm pessimism, I'm jealousy,
They'll subvert it eventually. I'll get taken for a ride.
I am a pain, I am a bore, but when you sing, people tend to listen more. Is this a song? Well, no, it ain't. This is a musical complaint. I got hate, I got
Is this another 4th wall break?
for twice my age, and this feeling, this taste, will not desist, it will not stop. And I can't stand the wait. No, 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 I can't stand the wait.
It's interesting how much mileage they've gotten out of this rhythm. I really figured they'd have changed it up by now. Well, I mean, they did. Well, no. It's the same accent pattern. We've just gotten rid of the intensity. evolution of this entire process is interesting.
The same as Paul, same as Christ, and it's all within my frame to do something awful or something nice. Stay free, Hail Marys for me. Girl, yeah, your mouth is open wide, and I can see everything inside. You better keep your mouth shut for now. Now, girl, yeah, your mouth is open wide, and I can see everything you hide. You better keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Better keep your mouth shut. Yeah, your mouth is open wide, and I can see everything that you hide. All of the time that you lie. Keep your mouth shut. 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 You better got to stop with that. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth.
So I know the phrase "say three Hail Marys" for me cropped up in this track somewhere, but honestly, the part that I think kind of stands out to me the most is that it feels like this is three songs. And so if that line hadn't have popped up, I think I would have just taken it as each song is a Hail Mary, in that each idea that they crafted didn't really go anywhere. They didn't know what to do with it, so they put the three of them together in hopes that it made a full song. That was kind of where I was going with that. Um, I don't know if that reading is particularly true. I don't know if that's the intent of it, but there is a lot of disparate division between these three sounds. In fact, the first sound and the second were separated by silence, a couple of beats, maybe even a full bar. I don't quite remember, but it was certainly like we ended one idea and started the next. There was a clear break between them. The second and third deviated quite a bit. And to be fair, the heaviness of our second section did come into the ending of our third. So there was a little bit more synergy there, but all of the ideas from our first section are stuck to just it. We didn't hear the sonic qualities of it. We didn't hear the rhythmic components of it. We didn't the melodies. None of it were represented anywhere else in the track. So I'm a little torn on this one. I don't think it quite works together in the same way that Suffocation of the Soul did, in that they utilized a longer format in order to achieve more cohesion between theme. Although, now that I say that, I haven't read the lyrics yet, so maybe there is some cohesion there. But musically, it's very segmented. And it's interesting, if nothing else, than to hear these three sides of them. Sort of the punkier side, the moodier side, and the aggressive side. All three of them represented here in full. And while most of the songs might showcase one or two of them, and across a couple of songs you can hear all three sides of the band, this is really a good showcase to say this might not be their best song, but you certainly get a little taste of everything. It's like a dinner made up of appetizers from all sorts of different ideas. The palate's going to be a little weird, and you might need a palate cleanser between different food types, but you're going to get to taste everything the restaurant makes, which is its own kind of coolness. Um, Other than that, I don't know that I have anything else to say on this one. It's a neat conglomeration of everything they've done, but I find it to be a bit weak in execution. Though I did really enjoy the end. I think that final moment worked really well. And when I mentioned the first part of the song not being represented elsewhere, I was talking about the grungy part, the rhythmic that they had, the rhythmic idea on the guitars and drums. I completely forgot that this thing started out electronically. Like, just completely forgot that that was a thing that happened. There were so many other disparate sections that an entire little electronic intro was so far from my memory. So that's a thing too. I do like part of this, but there is this hard break at the end that I can't seem to reconcile the final lyrics with everything else. This is a song about coming to terms with humanity. The opening two stanzas are about all of the negativity that humans are capable of, done through the lens of these are things I am capable of. I am regret, I am doubt, I am alone, I am without, I am despair, I am guilt, I am the sand on which I'm built, I am malaise, I'm wasted youth, I am aggression, I'm ugly truth, I am refusal, I am attack. It says, and I can't stand the weight. It goes on. Things get worse. Revolt, abuse, giving up, excuse, pessimism, jealousy, impatience, and bigotry, being a pain, being a bore. He says, but when you sing, people tend to listen more. Is this a song? No. It's more of a musical complaint. I have rage and I have a hate, enough for twice my age. And this feeling of distaste, it will not decease, it will not stop, and I can't stand the weight. I'm going to break these things in my heart, dark and disgusting, feeding and growing, they're taking over. He says, all of us are born the same, and it's all within my frame, all within my humanity, to do something awful or do something nice. So say 3 Hail Marys for me. This idea of coming to terms with the fact that humanity can be dark, that we all have the capacity for really dark things. And most of us have even done something we're not too proud of. Maybe not everything in the list, but we all have made a dark decision in the past. We've all done something that we're not super happy about. It may not be something as big as attacking someone. It could just be your pessimism, could be a jealousy that you just can't shake. None of us are perfect, and that's a heavy weight. Now, all of that is a rather cohesive start, but our final 3 stanzas are a repetition. Girl, your mouth is open wide, and I can see everything inside. You better keep your mouth shut for now. Uh, Changes the line, I can see everything inside, to I can see everything you hide, to all of the times that you lied. The idea of just being vulnerable and open and transparent. And the lyricist now sees all of the negativity that this person is. How that relates to anything else, I don't know. Unless this is supposed to be the capacity for evil, I have no idea. I don't really get the final stanza of this. So we're going to move on. The song seems to me just as disjointed as the music is. and I guess I just have to be okay with that. Next up on the list is Blood. Bunny. Larkhall. Let's dig in. Oh, yes. I really like those rising guitar slides. You know, it's interesting that this has a bit of a nu metal edge to it. It's a real strong darkness in the music behind it. Lots of tension. So much pain right here. That bass tone every time. Oh, some really fun drumming too. Using the bell of the ride cymbal. Very tense. Oh, the staccato small climb. Oh no, it's the up and down. Given that they were opening the staccato up to longer notes, I really thought we were going to have a punchy, heavy-hitting section right here. Just these opening chords is not where I expect it to go. Oh, that dissonance came in real heavy right there. the release here is palpable.
First it's dark, and then it's light, and then dark again. You're bleeding, but it's alright, 'cause we'll stay awake the whole night, 'cause I found a rock in an ancient place, and it's older than the human race. So let's build a fire, a holy light for astronauts.
The tension and release right here is very nice. A way to wrap this album up with a little bit of resolution somewhere.
With soldiers' hearts and pioneers of earthly odds.
I don't know what time signature that was in. I thought initially it might have been a type of 3. Triplets or 6/8 or something. But it ended before I could really catch on. The thing is that it feels like triplets. They were emphasizing triplets, but it didn't repeat in a nice solid way in 3. So my guess is they were probably doing 4/4 with like 3/3/2, but I didn't have time before the song ended to test the hypothesis. So we end the album in a much nicer way than we began it. There was certainly some angriness in Blood Bunny Larkhall. Can't wait to get into the lyrics there to see what that one's all about. But it ends on a bit of a lighter note. And I think did it end with vocals only, or is that like I can't remember if that was an intermission before an ending with the same vocal lines but with instruments, or if that's actually how we ended it. But then we move into a short history of nearly everything, and it is sort of all over the place. We have heavy sections. We have some really groovy, funky things going on. We kick it off with some really strong bass work, Harmonies, actually, I think Three Hail Marys separates everything out nicely, but I think this does a really good job of showing off their three sides as well, but more in tandem with each other rather than in isolation. You can hear the post-hardcore, the grunge, the punk influences throughout this track, but you don't actually ever hear a moment where it is like, oh, that's the punky side of them. It's just there is usually an instrument doing something punky in some of the sections, that kind of vibe. And it's just a really nice sister song to Three Hail Marys that showcases a bit of a longer writing style and an exploration of much of their compositional, um, how they're consistent with composition, the things, the styles and sounds that they lean on in order to craft the what they're most comfortable with. But they do it in two very different ways here. Whereas Three Hail Marys is very isolated, and this one merges everything into a single sound. That's the 3 minute or 3 hour and 23 minute mark. My guess was off by a little bit. I'd say we probably only have about another 10 minutes left, though. I don't know why I'm telling you because you can just look in the title thing to find out. I did enjoy, though, at the end, right before our heavy outro, that there was resolution to this. We had a jumping back and forth of heavier chords with brighter chords, tension, resolution, tension, release, that kind of vibe. The harmonies that the vocals were giving us were mostly tension, but at least the guitars were giving us that release that not much of this album has really given us. A lot of it has either just been fun in isolation or heavy in commiseration with all the other heavy, dreary tracks on the album. And so, for this to be a song that feels thematically heavy from the musical perspective, it feels like they're still exploring some of the sadness or darkness or anger that we've seen throughout the album. It also presents a bit of a nice ending. Granted, it's the penultimate section. The final part of the track is angsty drive without resolution, completely cyclical, just sitting within this cycle of aggression and forward momentum. But at least prior to that, which could be seen as the outro of the song, there is this element of finding resolution to the music that we just haven't really got to hear elsewhere. And I appreciate that at the very end, they're like, we'll give them a little bit more of this generic sound, but it's still very Reuben. They're not going to allow us to reside in that. And in such, they give us the true outro, which is just the power drive that we get to finish the track off. Just all aggression, odd time signature, weird timing, left off kilter. I mean, that's what I said I liked about them, was that they took the rug out from under me, and when I thought I knew what ending they were going for, they gave me something totally different. So let's hit some lyrics and see how they decide to wrap this one up. Blood Bunny Larkhall. I don't know what it means, but I really dig the message here. It starts off, says, you're taking sides. You're right or wrong. You're run or fight. Your choice. You're taking sides. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this opening here. It could just be every day in life. You got to take sides. You got to make a decision. You have to make a choice. Some of those choices are very black or white. Wrong, right, run, fight. But not every choice is. And not every choice is specifically about a proper and an improper decision. So I like where the chorus takes us then. It says, I feel like reading books is wrapping me up in layers of history. I feel like singing songs is wrapping me up in layers of history. And it took me a second to figure this out. The reading books makes sense. You are participating in something that has been done before you. You can't read a book that hasn't been written yet. So that is very clearly participating in the past, wrapping yourself up in history. But I feel like singing songs is wrapping me up in layers of history. It took me a second to get. And I think the part of it is creating history. It's not history today, but, well, let me say, it wasn't history in 2007, but today, him singing songs created history that I'm now exploring. I am wrapping myself up in layers of music's history, of grunge and post-hardcore's history, of the beginnings of a new era. I've heard Reuben was rather influential on a lot of bands, and thus I'm seeing an inception point right here. But it takes on a new meaning with the next few lines that took me a second to appreciate. You're holding hands. You're making kids, growing old, and dying. Everything you do, no matter how small it might seem, affects something else. Trust me, it's true. The idea that history isn't just what you read in books, it's not just the art that passes down through time. It's not just what was popular enough to be remembered. Yes, you watch a film from the 1940s and maybe nobody who made it is still alive. That's history. You read a book from the 1700s, that's history. You learn about events from thousands of years ago, that's history. But what you did yesterday is also history, and while it may not be written down in some book for generations in the future to learn about, it may be recorded verbally, a story passed down to your next generation. Maybe your kids, maybe your nieces or nephews, maybe it's how your aunt and uncle met. Maybe one of your nieces remembers it, and the day that you pass in the memorial service, it's repeated. Maybe nobody remembers it. Maybe the actions you make are never recorded and never recited. It's still part of history. And just because nobody remembers the specific moment, just because nobody is repeating the story of that specific moment, doesn't mean that it doesn't affect someone else. A kind gesture to somebody can brighten their day enough in a way that makes it so that they don't do something drastic later. They might not necessarily know what made their mood lift on that day. You might not even know the impact you had, but it's part of history. And that's what he says here. I feel like being here is wrapping me up in layers of history. I feel like seeing this, breathing it in, simply existing is wrapping me up in layers of history. I just really love that entire perspective. It isn't about being popular and remembered, it's simply about existing. History is everything. And your actions are important. The whole concept of the butterfly effect is that if you go back in time and change one little thing, it can have drastic repercussions in the future. But I think it's important to remember that in the present context as well. As he states, just simply existing is wrapping me up in layers of history. Your mere presence is history and can drastically change what happens in the future. It's a really good message in a song title that I don't understand the correlation there. And this is a beautiful way to not only wrap up the entire album, but to also piggyback off of the ideas we just explored. He talks about their best adventure, the singer and someone else, the night that they crept out of the house at midnight to climb Wester's Hill. And he cut his leg open on the fence and cried. And it was honestly just a hill. But when they got up there, it felt like they were on top of the world. And you said to me, our teachers had faith in their lessons and their doctrine, but these facts are unreliable and the cracks are undeniable. Do you feel the warmth beneath your feet? It's because the earth is so very old. Seemingly profound ideas here. The thoughts of youth, possibly teens, at midnight. Finishes off with a quote. Says, "You're bleeding, but it's alright. Because we'll stay awake the whole night. Because I found a rock in an ancient place, and it's older than the human race, so let's build a fire, a homing light. For astronauts and satellites, for scientists with soldiers' hearts, for pioneers of earthly arts. You and me, we're dead in the blink of an eye. We've been and gone and dead in a blink of the earth's eye. Our time on this planet is so short that the best we can do, realizing how much time has gone before us, speaking about that the earth is so very old and that we can feel the warmth of it beneath our feet, finding rocks in ancient places that's older than the human race. It says we should build a light, a homing light. To me, I read that as a lighthouse, something to stray people away from danger and into safety. He says we'll make this light for astronauts and scientists and pioneers. And I really like that idea. Our time is but fleeting, and we should use it to make things better. To make a light to guide people towards also helping humanity. And it's just a really strong takeaway there, told through this really interesting metaphor. Pretty much the whole song here is just a recounting of this evening. Very personal story to this person, and yet very powerful message. And like I said, it piggybacks really well off of the previous track, which had stated that everything we do is history. We affect people's lives simply by being. And I kind of like how he's like, if you don't believe me, I'll prove it. And then just tells a pretty benign story about sneaking out at night to climb a mountain and realizing we need to be better. We need to do good for all of humanity. And simply by existing, we can ensure that we're one more voice, one more fire that guides people towards positivity. For an album that started so dark and dreary and weighty and has asked some pretty big questions. I mean, we got into the idea of the human condition. We asked, how do we continue on knowing what we're capable of? I think ending it with, we're also capable of greatness and we should focus on that, is just a really great way to lift this track out of some of the heavier topics while still not shying away from the questions posed by them. It's not saying we should ignore that for the fun Although sometimes we do, like with Ninja Assassin and Good Luck, but we can meet it head on and try something that might work. And I just really appreciate that for all of the heaviness, the weight, the disillusionment, the anger that this album has in it. It ends and says we don't have to be that. It's hard. Lots of things in life are hard, and not doing wrong is one of those. But it is a choice. And pick a side. Those are my thoughts on Reuben's In Nothing We Trust. Let me know what you thought of this album. Give me your thoughts, perspectives, comments, if you enjoyed it, anything else. You got alternate reads and some of this stuff, throw it down there in the comments. I'm open for good conversation. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. Nope. My brain's so fried from that ending. I'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to do a live stream. Everyone's invited. The songs are pre-selected. But come around and chat. Explore some music. It's just a really nice chill hangout session. I dig into analysis a little bit, but for the most part, just kind of like hanging out with me on a Sunday and listening to some new jams. Very lighthearted vibe on everything. Lots of joking. More comical, I think, than the usual reactions. Just whatever, if you're interested in that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.